My name is Chris Robb. For those of you that don't know me, I'm the CEO and founder of Mass Participation World. Delighted to be your host over the next 2 hours and 45 minutes. We've extended the usual 2.5 hours. We've got so much amazing content, so many speakers. We have 20 speakers from literally all across the world, including Hugh, Brasher, race director of London Marathon. So hugely excited for the session. Keep on saying hello in the chat. As always, with a webinar, the way to interact with us in the studio and with other speakers and delegates is through the chat function or the Q&A. I'm joining you out of a studio here in Bali. I've got a team of 4 people supporting me. We're looking at the chat and Q&A, so we'll try and answer as many of your questions and comments as we go through. We're live streaming on Facebook, on the MPW Facebook page, so if you do need to leave, rest assured that the live stream is there. You can come back to it. We are also recording, and we will, as always, make the recording available to people afterwards. So if you do have to drop off, we will make that available to you. We're also live streaming into China. Big thanks, as always, to Julia Chui, Jerry, and Qing Ling from CGX Consulting. And let's get into the program. So the first segment, which will come up in a couple of minutes, is good news and cool things from the registration world. We then go into a segment which is called The View from Down Under, what's happening in Australia and New Zealand. Typically, I would announce all our speakers at this stage, but because we got so many of them tonight, I'm just going to announce them as we get to the segments. The next segment is called The Counter Argument, Japanese Race Registration Trends, which, without giving the game away, are not quite as bullish as they are in other parts of the world. We then move to the Middle East. So we're fundamentally moving from east to west during the course of the program, running events in the Middle East as public health interventions. That's a panel discussion. We have 6 panelists there. We then go on to a segment called The Sky's the Limit, how Let's Do This helped the TCS London Marathon reach 840,000, and Hugh Brasher obviously as part of that. The pace is building, new races and emerging markets in Africa. We then go across to Latin America, LATAM flying high, updates from South America, and the final segment, which I know is going to be a fascinating one, inside running in the USA, some really fascinating data from Running USA, and Jay Holder will be joining us to do that. And we then come and wrap up and close. So let's get underway with our first segment, and delighted to welcome a huge friend of MPW and World Athletics, Pierre Duvelleroy, who's the founder of NUCO. He's going to take us through a presentation, good news and cool things from the registration world. Welcome, Pierre. Wonderful to see you.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you for having me on behalf of all the ASICS Apps family. I'm very happy to share some really, good news and cool things about, registration. So let's get underway. We have been gathering data across the different registration platforms in the Americas, Europe, Asia, and Oceania. And what you're about to see is really, a global appreciation of where the industry is. There might be some, differences between countries and some regions, but overall things are extremely exciting. And before I even get into this, just in May, when we compare the 2023 events opened at the same time compared to this year, we are currently trailing 50%. You heard me right, 50% above 2023. So that's a global statistic, but this is massive. In 20 years in the registration world, I've never, ever seen something like this. We went through a crisis, with the 2010 crisis, and, the comeback, the bounce back was never like what we're seeing today. So it's really, really impressive. And to get started, one of the key things we wanted to share with you today is that when we compare the 2023 registration prices in 2019, we see a 20% increase in prices, and it's gone even higher on the first quarter of 2024. So, I mean, this is fantastic because we all know it's really difficult to put events, out there and make things work. Good news is when you know that the participation is so high and the prices have gone up 20%, you know, in 2023 compared to 2019, and they're even higher on the first quarter of 2024, that's fantastic news, right? So you guys can see the breakdown here per distance. Obviously, you know, the variation changed based on the distance. That's quite obvious, but that's fantastic news to share today with you guys. So what this means is that the price elasticity is much higher than what people have thought for the past, you know, decade or so. In terms of registrations, we were 25% up in 2023. We're now trailing somewhere between 35 and 40%. You heard me right. 50% of our market is currently around 5K distances. So the reason why we have this slide is because what this means is the shorter distances are really, you know, selling out extremely fast. And what this means is that there is a very high chance that we have a lot of new runners on the market. And, you know, it's quite normal that when you start your running journey, you start with 5Ks and 10Ks and you build up to half marathons and marathons. So what this means for the years to come is potentially a fantastic growth across all the distances. The market has, you know, grown significantly. I don't know if you remember a presentation I was giving 2 years ago for MPW. In 2021, Strava was recording 2 million new users per month, and it's been growing ever since. Yes, you heard me right. So this is really, really fascinating what's going on. What, you know, how it translates in terms of, you know, sign-up behavior is also very interesting. Since, you know, we have a lot of short distances, well, most people tend to register fairly late, 90 days to a few days before the race, you know, but as the distance goes, you know, a little longer, obviously people sign up slightly earlier. This has changed a lot compared to 2019. People tend to sign up a little later. I know it's more complexity for event organizer out there, but that is a reality, and that's probably because we have a lot of new runners that are not used to consume races as, you know, it was, you know, people used to do in 2019. When you look at the half marathons and the marathons, obviously people tend to register much earlier, but again, it has drifted closer to the even date compared to what it used to be. So again, that's very interesting. What this slide says as well is when you have a half and a full marathon, you've got plenty of time to, you know, create a relationship with your participant, better understand who they are and how to best serve them at the event. Really fascinating times these days. So now let's jump into the features and services that we've noticed, you know, popping up and becoming more and more popular. All of these are, you know, seen across many different registration platforms, not just the ASICS apps family. So it's just, you know, really something like a really global overview. First thing is training plans. Very interesting to see how the training plan market has exploded. There's a lot of new players in the space. There's a lot of alternatives out there, a lot of services. Many partners, you know, can be reached out to. There's always a revenue share for events. It's little to no support for the event, obviously. And if you're able to put this into your, you know, registration journey, you can drive, you know, 3 times more conversion than usual. So this is a fantastic revenue stream and a great add-on for some of your participants, not all of them. Of course, you've got many participants who have their own stuff, knows how to train and so on. But this is something that we see more and more, and a lot of training platforms are reaching out to us, so that confirms that, you know, this trend. Second one is a funny one, but a real good source of revenue that doesn't cost anything for you guys. It's the bib number purchase. Super easy to implement. Participants basically just get to pick the bib number they want, and you can charge for this. You know, you can charge somewhere between 5 to, I've seen, you know, close to 10 euros on some races. It's got a fantastic feel-good effect for participants. Super easy to implement once again, and you'll see that between 3 to 4% of your participants, you know, will take that option. So why not make the money when it's that easy to, you know, to get? Check an application. Well, used to be something that was fancy a couple of years ago. Now it's really critical, more than ever. It's important to have, such a service, and we see it, on pretty much all the events now. Participants show up with a QR code. You can control the status of their registration, but most importantly, it allows you to control your traffic at the expo or at the event. It allows you to understand if you're going to have a rush of people, coming up to the event last minute. It gives you some, live statistics on what's going on. And when you have a much smaller race, it also, simplify your events organization. You can basically allocate / print bib numbers on the fly, super convenient. And again, we see this as a massive trend. More and more events are using it. Digital challenges is another thing that, some people would argue that this is a thing of the past. It's very COVID-like, but actually there's still a lot of, digital challenges that are really working well out there. It's also very easy to implement, whether it's with Runkeeper or Strava or you name it. It doesn't take long to implement. So that's a great way to connect with your audience. And as I was saying earlier on, when you have a longer distance of somewhere between a half, a marathon, or an ultra marathon, you've got plenty of time to interact with your participants. So why not creating these challenges to promote your sponsors and create additional touch point, between the registration day and event day? Fantastic add-on. Digital challenges. Cancellation insurance. So with a cost of around 10% of, your shopping cart, it's kind of a no-brainer for participants, but it should also be for event organizer. We have about 10% of your participants that are going to take the cancellation insurance. And what it does is that it really protects your event. You keep the registration money. Your participant gets a full refund, okay, for just 10% of their purchase. And it automates it decreases the support level on your event. So there's been discussions around cancellation insurance. I think it's a no-brainer. More and more events are using it. And when you have a kickback from the insurance company, like most cancellation insurance providers do, it's kind of a no-brainer to us. So if you don't have that today, well, just know that participants are getting more and more used to this kind of service. Flash registration, very interesting one. A lot of event organizers, have come to us over the past couple of years saying that a registration process should be extremely fast. Well, that's arguable because we've developed a flash registration system which allows you to basically register, yourself, by just answering 2 or 3 fields per participant. It's super easy. You only get 10% of people doing this. So what this means is, while it's very interesting for some of your participants, it appears that when participants are registering for your event, you do have more time than you think to present your event. So I urge you to think about this in a way of like onboarding participants when they're registering, not just gathering the data you need for race day, but actually a fantastic opportunity to understand who they are and why they're coming to your race, So think about it, again, super interesting. And, this is something we wanted to share with you because, it does say that we have more time than we think and that we can actually better understand who we're talking to, which leads me to another massive trend in the industry, which is custom single sign-on. So what does that mean? It means that a lot of beautiful brands out there are creating user accounts. So if you want to register for an Ironman race or UTMB race or a Time 2/ASO race, well, you're going to have to create a user account to do that. It speeds up the reg process, but most importantly, it creates a database of users against which you will understand how many registrations they do, like how they consume your brand. It improves the data quality, but it also enables something that we're just about to, to really like tap into. It's benefits for your users. So once you understand, like if they come to your brand like once or twice or more, like every year, you get to put benefits in place, such as VIP treatments or, loyalty programs and stuff like that. But to be able to, you know, to do that, you have to have this user account / you know, single sign-on strategy in your event. And what's very interesting is that the brands are taking this ownership, and that really redefines how, you know, we can drive events afterwards. We are making things more personal, you know, these days, and we are getting, you know, into this era where we can really understand who we're dealing with, to a point where I think we're not far away from having custom registration journeys. So participant A and participant B registered for the same event. We can very well create two complete different registration journeys based on what we know from them, what device they use, their location, and now, you know, what data we have in their user account. So very strategic, doesn't apply to everybody out there, but I just wanted to lay it out because this is a massive trend. Prepaid places, it's probably one of my favorites, and you can see why, you know, with the bullet points. It's dedicated to companies, you know, the company registration, you know, is, you know, getting more and more popular. You know, companies have this social responsibility to get people healthy as well. So they're looking for things to do. Events is a perfect fit. And when it comes down to registration for, you know, these companies, it's not the most user-friendly thing. It usually ends up with Excel files. It's not super friendly. So what we've seen, and, you know, which is working really well, is prepaid places. So a company would come in and buy registration in bulk. They pay by bank transfer or credit card. We don't really care, you know. But what it means is that the money is guaranteed. It improves your cash flow because you have the money instantly, right? And then the company will start signing up individuals. And I'm sorry, it stays between the 500 of us today, but the beauty of this is that 8% of these places, you know, will drive some no-show. So they won't be consumed. So it's cash that you can keep. And, you know, it's just an additional great news for today. And of course, it drives less support, you know, because it's super easy to do. They are in control. They can cancel people, add some more people. It's just fantastic stuff. Prepaid places, guys. And last but not least, World Athletics and ASICS are organizing a business conference in Colorado in July. It's called the Business of Running Events. This is going to be the first of its kind event executives conference. There's amazing speakers, people from Brain Trust, from Netflix, from the Major League Baseball. So have a look, guys, on the website. This is going to be you know, somewhere you want to be this summer. That's it for me for today. Off to you, Chris, and thank you again, guys, for your attention. If you want to reach out, you know, just a phone call or an email away, so don't hesitate. Cheers.
Thanks so much, Pierre. Some really exciting stats there. Great to see the good news in terms of the numbers, and a couple of quick things. I mean, that whole concept of converting people at registration, some of the statistics you gave there, the one that someone actually put in the chat, which you may not have seen, the Royal Parks half in London, 35% of 15,000 participants opted in for the coaching at registration. Now, I'm not sure what the revenue model was on that, but my calculations, 35% of 15,000 is over 5,000 people. Whether you're making $1 from each of them or you're building extra engagement, it seems like it's a great opportunity and a no-brainer.
It is indeed. Yeah, and it's the and it's something to bear in mind for events organizers. There you can grow your participant base, and that's what's happening right now. Of course, you can get more front sponsors, but there is a clear path where you can get a lot more by just increasing the shopping cart amount, by adding services that make sense for the participant. Consolation insurance, training plans. We just rolled out at NUCO an accommodation solution. So I don't really have enough, you know, feedback to share with the audience today, but I've always been curious to see how accommodation could translate during the reg process. Well, people, you know, surprisingly, people have 2,000 euros to spend, you know, over 4 days in a nice hotel. We see like huge transactions coming through. And what that means is that you can, as an events organizer, you can get a cut of this as long as it's in your registration journey. So just for the guys out there, something to, you know, take into account into their strategy.
Fantastic, Pierre. We'll let you go. Thanks so much for joining us. Great to see you again. And we'll move on to the next segment, which is one where we're going to welcome Chris Heverin, who's the chair of the Australian Mass Participation Sports Events Alliance, AMSI. The view from down under, what's happening in Australia and New Zealand. Great to see you, Chris, as always. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure, Chris, and thanks for the opportunity this evening.
Late night there in Melbourne after 10 o'clock, so we've got all spectrums of the globe here. But let's start by you maybe just giving us a bit of a sense, please, of what's happening in the running industry in Australia and New Zealand, bit of an overview.
Sure. Well, I think Pierre's comments there at the start of his presentation about the positivity are exactly what we're experiencing here in Australia. We've had significant growth this year, particularly over 2023. And compared to pre-COVID numbers in 2019. So, in fact, from a statistics point of view, where registrations are up 70% on 2019, which is fantastic. But the other side of it, which is quite interesting, is that our number of event operators that are running events is down by 40%. So we've got a lot more people coming to less events, which is an interesting development.
That's fascinating, and certainly, you know, hearing bits of consolidation in other parts of the market. Any sort of anecdotal, where's that come from? The 40% less. Just it seems fairly obvious, I guess. People just didn't return after COVID. Is it consolidation? People buying up smaller businesses and building bigger businesses?
A little bit of consolidation. I think the bigger events, there's definitely a trend in terms of, you know, the people wanting to the marathon figures are fantastic. Two of the major marathons here are already sold out. The Melbourne Marathon in October is sold out. The Sydney Marathon in September is sold out. So those figures are really encouraging. But there's also the 5K races seem to be attracting, or the research is telling us that the groups and people wanting to get into the sport, have fun with their friends and have an experience is definitely a big factor. On the downside, the drop off of the 40% is a lot to do with cost coming back from COVID. Costs have gone up considerably, and you know, there are issues here in Australia with the governance and the costs of councils and permits and police and so on. Suppliers has increased significantly.
So that in some instances is actually literally just meaning that events can't get their permits, or it's more a budgetary thing? Are governments reducing the number of permits, or it's more that events can't afford the costs of putting them on with the new requirements?
It's the difficulty of getting the permits. The level of governance has increased quite considerably to the pre-COVID, and also the cost involved in that. So things like consultant reports that weren't required previously are now required. Cost of police, if you're doing road closures and so forth, have gone up considerably. So that's where the smaller operators have elected not to come back after COVID and not take the risk. But as I said, the numbers have swollen significantly, you know, in the other events. So which is a good thing. So our total numbers are up 70%, as I said earlier, which is a huge result.
Yeah, and your revenues, Chris, is that mirroring what Pierre said as well, that entry fees have increased and the market's tolerating that?
I think entry fees have gone up a little bit. I don't think they've gone up to the level that Pierre mentioned. I think he said that 20% or thereabouts. So not seeing that, but definitely people are endeavouring to increase their pricing and push the pricing up. There is a cost of living crisis here in Australia that does affect pricing. So we're very mindful of being able to keep on top of the pricing.
Yeah, and you mentioned Melbourne Marathon selling out, Sydney Marathon selling out. I mean, share with us the numbers on that. I mean, Sydney, obviously, Abbott World Marathon Majors candidate city to potentially be the 6th major, and the way that those entries have exploded in the last 2 years. Can you talk us through some of the stats around that in terms of the sheer scale of growth?
Yes, well, it's 40,000, I believe, for both of them. What they're at. With the Melbourne event, they've introduced a wait list, and they're looking to introduce which I think is a smart play. So as people drop off and withdraw or have injuries or so forth, they can add them in there. And then also you've got the running festivals around those numbers as well. So the 5Ks, the 10Ks, the half marathons, those numbers are still ticking over. So, but the marathon runs themselves have actually the allocations for those, which I believe are around about 20,000, the early 20,000s for the marathon itself.
Wow, that's incredible. And then at the opposite end of the extreme, last weekend, I think I'm right, was the Mother's Day Classic across Australia with, am I right in saying 80 or 90,000 participants across the country at 4K and 8K level?
Yeah, that was a great success. Again, it's an interesting model. It's a charitable, it's a non-for-profit charity event, and there's about 40 destinations around the country, and that's a franchise model out to operators around. So many event operators pick up that event as for cash flow purposes and using their skills and their staff to keep things ticking over. So it's a highly successful event. You know, on an interesting day, on Mother's Day, which some years ago people would not have thought would have been possible, but now it's you know, it's quite the opposite. People are out celebrating Mother's Day by attending the event, so which is great. And there was also the HBF event in Perth last weekend, which had just on 40,000 as well. So so the numbers are very strong around the country.
Yeah, I got both my hands in the air. I delivered the first event of the Mother's Day Classic. It used to be called Race Abreast and raising charity for money for cancer. And we sat around the table and the proposal was to move it to Mother's Day. I said, "You're absolutely crazy. People aren't going to come out on Mother's Day." How wrong was I? Completely wrong.
Yeah, so I think we're all in the same
on to be a phenomenon, made millions and millions of dollars for charity. It's incredible. Chris, I know we're on a running show here, but how's it reflecting in other parts of the industry, triathlon and cycling and the other elements of mass participation? Is that coming back strongly as well?
I think the areas there's been definitely some research that I've seen recently that's indicated that people are looking for an experience and are looking to do things with their friends, and so events that are predominantly on they're highly competitive based on timing. I've seen some stuff from mountain biking that has dropped away quite a bit in terms of the timed competitive racing, but the experiential events where people are going away for weekends is holding its ground and going quite strong. In fact, one of the slogans they're saying is that, you know, they don't want to see any lycra. They want people there in baggy shorts and t-shirts and having a good time. Similarly with OCR seems to have dropped a little bit in terms of the competitive side of things. So those numbers are certainly down a little bit, not massively, but they've definitely dropped back. But, you know, when you look at the growth, as I said earlier in the industry, it is in running. It's the running events is where the growth has come through.
Right. And kind of looking in a crystal ball, Chris, 12 months down the track, what do you see some of the opportunities? Where do you see it going? You've touched on some of the challenges already. Do you see that there's other challenges that maybe we haven't touched on that may affect the industry in the next 12 months?
I think the industry has come back very strongly, and so we should feel good about where we're heading. There are some discussions and some movement around collaboration, aggregation of data and so forth. So that's something that will definitely be unfolding over the next 12 months that I think will be a significant change in the marketplace here that will be something that, you know, people may be interested in other parts of the world, but that is certainly where things are moving, particularly in areas like insurance and merchandising and so on. There's some movement afoot in that space, so that will be more for an update probably 3-6 months time. But there's definitely some work going on behind the scenes in that space from a broader industry perspective, and from an AMC point of view, the industry body. It's still going along quite solidly. We've got an annual conference that has been booked again, and that's been very successful. And we're also looking at some fundraising initiatives through an industry-wide collaboration and so on to be able to generate some income for the industry body, so we can actually provide further services back into the industry, which I think is needed. We still get a lot of people coming to us and asking for advice on how to do this, or where do I go for that, or who do I talk to for risk or whatever. There's still a need out there for that sort of support, and similarly for government to be able to still talk to the governments around the country. It's still been an important part of what we do.
Wonderful. And yeah, again, congrats on the success of AMSI, Chris. I think there's more and more of these industry bodies that are coming together, which we need, and to create not only country collaboration like you've created with AMSI, but how do we bring this all together on these kind of forums to share best practice across the world. So look forward to continuing to work with you. Time's up, but yeah, really want to thank you for late night attendance in Melbourne and for the valuable insights, Chris.
My pleasure, and enjoy the rest of the webinar. Thanks for that, Chris. Good
Thanks,
stuff.
Chris. See you soon. Bye-bye. So we shift from Australia up to Japan, and delighted to welcome Brett Larner, who's the founder and editor of Japan Running News, and he's going to have a conversation with Alessio Punzi, who all of you should know by now, but in case you don't, the head of road running and mass participation at World Athletics. They're going to have a conversation, the counter-argument, Japanese race registration trends. Hello, Brett and Alessio, and I'll leave it over to you.
Hello, Chris, and thank you. How are you, Brett?
Not bad. How are you doing?
It's been a while, huh?
Yeah. Thanks very much for asking me to be a part of it.
No, thank you for always providing us with so much wisdom coming out of your blog, and certainly also those opportunities. In those opportunities that we have to get you on screen, there is certainly a lot that we can always learn from you. But unlike me, some people today among our audience may not know you. So who are you and what are you doing in Japan? Would you start with an intro?
Yeah, I do a variety of work within the running industry in Japan. I would say my primary two areas. One, I run the website Japan Running News, which I've been doing since 2007 as an outlet for providing English language news and information about primarily elite racing in Japan, but as much of the general running scene and running industry as I can cover. And then I'm also a World Athletics authorized athlete representative. So I work with athletes from Japan in international racing, as well as athletes of other nationalities.
Brett, and there is the assumption that compared with other parts of the world, the contemporary distance running, contemporary marathon movement, as we know it today in other parts of the world, well, in Japan, the growth trajectory was kind of different. It originated as an elite sport. There is still today, there is a strong elite element. The Tokyo Marathon in its current form is a relatively new event. Could you describe us from your observation point what the evolution has been?
Sure. Yeah, elite racing has been prominent in Japan for a long time. There's an event that many of you may be familiar with, the Hakone Ekiden, which is a 2-day relay, long distance road relay for university students, where they have 5 students per team per day running about a half marathon in distance. And that's been going for 100 years now. And along with that, many full marathons and such geared towards elite athletes that have been going for decades. Mass participation or amateur-oriented events have existed for a long time, but maybe not in the same way as they do in other countries. I think the Tokyo Marathon, the shift of the Tokyo Marathon from being the Tokyo International Marathon, which was an elite men-only event, into a mass participation race in 2007, really had a transformative effect on pretty much every aspect of the industry here. That was really the first time that there was, a massive, 30,000 runner mass participation race going through the streets of a major city, and everybody saw that and said, "I want to do that." If you had been an amateur runner that wanted to do a marathon as a bucket list thing, maybe you'd go to Honolulu in the past, but Tokyo Marathon kind of opened the door for cities. For cities all across Japan to kind of follow that model and start, like a large scale marathon within their city. And the market grew extremely quickly from 2007 through about 2016. In late 2015, early 2016, the numbers of marathon finishers within Japan exceeded the number in the United States, which was a first. And
We're
that's
talking just full marathon distance, right?
full marathon distance only. That's correct. Yeah. That's the primary prestige event here, the full marathon. There are shorter distance races, everything from 2-kilometer kids races, 5-kilometer races, all the way up to 30 kilometers. But the marathon has always been the most popular distance, the real kind of bucket list type of distance.
Bretton, would you say that even in the races that don't have the longer tradition, an emphasis on the elite element is still there, or is it kind of waning?
Yeah, I would say if I could answer that the other way around, a lot of the long-standing elite races have kind of followed the Tokyo model and added a mass participation component. So, historically there were, 3 elite men's race marathons and 3 elite women's marathons. There was Fukuoka, Lake Biwa, and the Tokyo International for men. And there was the Tokyo International for women, which was a separate event. Osaka International Women's Marathon and the Nagoya International Women's Marathon. And of those, of the races that still exist out of those, the Fukuoka International Marathon is the only one that remains purely elite only. The Osaka International Women's Marathon has added a half marathon, a mass participation half marathon that's run concurrently with that is open to both men and women. But the other races have added a mass participation component to their elite only races. There are still a few, like within the collegiate and corporate or professional running circuits, there are still a few elite only races, but by and large, what were the historic elite races are now a combination of elite and mass participation.
But certainly there are things that aren't as easily replicable in other parts of the world. Like the UK charity model is unique to the UK mainly. And you cannot export to other countries hundreds of history of some Japanese events. But what is that other race organizers, marathon organizers, especially from other geographies, can learn from Japanese races? Because we always see hundreds of thousands of people lying up on the streets and millions, in some cases tens of millions watching on TV. What's the secret sauce there besides the tradition?
Well, the tradition is hard to overlook. That's a big part of it. Personally, I'm of the opinion that a big part of what drives the popularity and as a spectator sport, of running as a spectator sport, and of the broadcasts is simply the quality of the broadcast and kind of the production aesthetic of the broadcast. And so what I mean by that, taking it back to that the Hakone Ekiden, which the road relay. Typically, when you watch a road race, they will focus on the leaders of the race. And if it's a marathon, they might have a camera cut back to the top person from the country of the host marathon, so the top German in Berlin, whatever. And the aesthetic that they took when they started to broadcast the Hakone Ekiden was to present it as a 3-dimensional object, so covering multiple stories within the story to keep track of where a team that had a strong runner coming up later were relative to the leader, and to present different aspects of the race happening simultaneously. And that draws the viewer in a way that a typical race broadcast doesn't. And that aesthetic in turn translates into how marathons are broadcast. And so you don't have just the leader of the marathon. You have a second car, you have a third car, multiple cameras, and cutting back and forth between the different elements of the story. And it's kind of creating a picture of the race as a 3-dimensional object as opposed to something more pointillistic. And I think it's in many ways a higher quality product, and that has created demand for that product. It's not that demand was there, and so they're making this to sell to the demand. They made something that was good, and people have bought into it. So I've really come to believe.
Who's they?
Yes.
And who's they in the description? Who's they?
The TV broadcasters, the TV broadcasters, yeah. The many of the races, so for example, going back to Hakone again, have a long-standing relationship with particular media organizations, the Yomiuri or the Mainichi, different TV stations. So in the case of the Hakone Ekiden, the Yomiuri newspaper organization and Nippon Terebi and TV have a long-standing relationship with the event and work in conjunction with them to present the race in a way that generates interest. And so after decades of that, you have 30% viewership ratings for a 2-day university men's relay race. 2 years ago, the Hakone Ekiden, it was estimated that at some point during the 2-day broadcast, 65 million people tuned in. There's not many sporting events in the world that get that kind of viewership rating. We're talking, like a college men's road relay. So like they're obviously presenting it in a way that has appeal to a mass audience. And I think that approach, I think there's a lot to learn from the approach to how the race is presented to the public.
Yeah, and I assume that the editorial choices must be informed by a deep knowledge of the sport, which, as we know, isn't always the case.
Yes.
With the selection of commentators in some big races. Brett, being conscious of the time, I follow you on Twitter. I admit I don't read all the articles you publish on your very interesting blog, because some of them are just very niche. But one that caught my eyes a few weeks ago, and that was about certain races not growing, certain races not being fully sold out. What's going on there, and which are these races that, according to your data, are kind of struggling a little bit?
Yeah, I think you're referring to an article that I had translated from a Japanese media source in April, reporting that NHK, which is the Japanese government broadcaster, had done a survey of 25 mass participation races across the country on their entry rates, and found that 40% of them were under capacity. So the one that they cited in specific, the Kochi Ryoma Marathon, has a maximum field size of 12,000, but only had 9,300 entries this year. And so across the 25 races that they surveyed, which included both full marathons and half marathons, 40% of them did report under capacity, so not hitting entries. Prior to not hitting the entry capacity. Prior to the pandemic, it was pretty common that pretty much every full marathon, almost every race, would hit capacity immediately. It was extremely difficult to get into races, and that, if you take 40% as a fairly significant number, then there does seem to be a trend that the numbers may be dropping a bit. I looked at some of the bigger marathons just prior to the call. I looked up numbers at some of the bigger marathons in Japan. If you look at kind of the big five, Tokyo, Osaka, Nagoya, Yokohama, and Kobe. Tokyo, Osaka, Nagoya, and Yokohama all had lower starter numbers than prior to in 2024 than in 2019 prior to the pandemic. And so even at the very top level of the sport, within Japan, the biggest races, there is varying degrees of drop in entry numbers. But some of the sort of mid-tier races are seeing even higher percentage drops. I think.
And what could be a reason for that? Demographics or what?
Yeah, that's the one issue is, the population of Japan is decreasing. The Tokyo area population continues to has stabilized or continues to increase. The population of the rest of the country is decreasing. So some races there are just fewer people around. Some races have folded in recent years because they have the local population is no longer sufficient to operate the race. There are not enough people to volunteer, to course marshal, to handle the duties of putting on the race itself. Other factors, I think I said prior to the pandemic, it was quite common for pretty much every race to sell out. And I think in many cases, I know a lot of people. I have a lot of friends who are runners here, and in many cases, people would enter multiple marathons, not knowing which ones they were going to get through in the entry lottery, and maybe paying entry fees in multiple races, and then if they get into the one they really wanted, just not running the ones they had entered. And I think that sort of tendency to maybe enter 4 or 5 marathons and actually only run one is maybe tailing off a bit. So I think looking at the numbers just in prep for this evening's talk, I don't quite see it yet as like a market contraction necessarily. I don't think we're quite there yet. I think it's a little bit more of a stabilization where I think like the rapid increase from 2007 to 2016 and maybe continuing on to the beginning of the pandemic, there's a little bit of a bubble effect there, and that a little bit of oversaturation, maybe too many races to be sustainable, or too many big races to be sustainable. And now maybe we're seeing a little bit of stabilization to a race that if they were anticipating 12,000 people signing up and they're actually getting 9,300, then they're going to have maybe a more realistic target for their operation for next year. Of course, the increasing costs like everywhere else, and in particular, that's hitting Japan extremely hard right now because, as you may know, the yen is extremely weak right now. It continues to lose value, and so everything here is just getting more expensive. That's certainly a contributing factor as well. Maybe people, less willing to spend money on entry fees unless it's a race they really want to run.
Right, we didn't unfortunately have too much allocated time to this session today, but would you promise me to come back next time we have more time to do a Japan deep dive? Maybe
I'd be happy to.
A few months from now.
Okay.
Thanks for your time, Brett. And take it over, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you, Brett and Alessio. Fascinating statistics there, and I think lots to learn globally from the Japanese industry. Brett, we're going to say goodbye to you, but we're going to ask Alessio to stay on screen because he's going to now host a panel, Running Events in the Middle East as Public Health Interventions. We've got a wonderful panel here. We've got about 35 minutes of discussion, and delighted to welcome on screen, and we'll have Alessio plus 6 faces on the screen for you, but let me welcome them in order. Abdullah Jude, who's the race director of the Goa Marathon, joining us from Saudi Arabia. We have Ahmed Almajed, who's the events partner from Suffolk, joining us from Kuwait. We have Simon Milla, the CEO of Sports Hub KSA. We have Luca Onforio, Luca Onforio, who's the project leader, mass participation sporting events, RCS Sports and Events, DMCC. I believe you're joining us from Dubai, if I've got my facts right. We've got Ehrabi Nael, race and training program director of the Beirut Marathon Association. And we've got Joseph Rafferty, who's the event and business development director from Oman Sail, who's joining us from Oman. Over to you 6 gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. I think we're still missing Ahmed, but Alessio, I'll hand it to you and you get the conversation started.
No shortage of great opinionated speakers in any case. So either Ahmed or Wissam will join shortly, and we can do more of a deep dive in their respective countries. Thanks, Chris, and gentlemen, thank you for making time today. It really feels like traveling without leaving the couch, going from Japan to the Gulf region, really. Some of you have been part of our webinars before. For other, it's a first. I would like to start with a very general round of questions on where the running events industry, the mass participation events industry, is going in your respective countries. I would like to start with Simon as one of the longest serving professionals in Saudi Arabia. Simon, as we were preparing for this call the other day, you told me, I didn't know you that well, and I thought you were part of the fresh crop of international sport professionals that had flocked into the kingdom in the past 5 years. But no, I was wrong. You've been there long enough to have some perspective. So would you mind describing to us where the mass participation, but with especially running events industry, is now in Saudi Arabia, especially compared with 10 years ago?
Yeah, actually, I was asked in 2012, while I was still in Germany, to organize a running event in Saudi Arabia, and I had no idea about the Middle Eastern running scene. And back then, there was more or less running events only happening in compounds. Abdullah was organizing already in public, but not many have been organizing running events in public. I finally came 2016 as for the Ministry of Sports Olympic Committee, and I could only count like a handful of public running events. And now today, we surely have way more. I think we have roughly 30, 40 running events, but still there is no national events calendar accessible. The Federation is working on that, but many things are happening also still with private groups and compounds. in the desert. But the Riyadh Marathon was surely a monumental milestone for Saudi running, which happened in the first edition half marathon in 2019, and then the Sports for All Federation has now the third edition with roughly 20,000 participants, and this is pulling the whole running society in Saudi forward. But we are still in the early stage. I cannot really measure how many runners we have in Saudi. We don't have statistics about that, but we can see it's more and more running events, and the government is pushing out running events, and we see there are more running groups. I was a founder of a social running group in Riyadh when it was still not allowed for women to run publicly. It was in a diplomatic quarter, and we have been the only social running group. And today we have a handful of running groups, and one is very, very strong with, I think, over 1,000 members. So surely a lot has happened, especially since 2018, when women have been fully allowed to do things and groups have been publicly training and running. So as soon as something is visible in the streets, more is happening.
As soon as something is visible, more is happening. That is certainly a good argument for to encourage us all to be visible and to organize events in the middle of the street. Abdullah, how old is your event? Can you tell us a bit about the Khobar events?
Yes, so I want to talk about the Khobar race. He's born before 29 years. He's the oldest race in the Middle East. It was charity, and that race they did it by 10,000 runners. But 2023, it was that race became official under the Saudi Federation and Arms Federation. And now we're looking forward to be Khobar from the top 3 in the world. We're looking for Mr. Abdulaziz, he's the CEO of the Rawabi company. And this company is produce oil, and he's also his international company. He looking to be from the top 3 in the world. Last year we did 5,000 meter, and it was they broken the Saudi record and the race record. It was 13:02, and also there is 2 athletes from South Africa and from Morocco. They broken the whole record for his country. The problem for Al-Khobar is not under the Saudi government. He's under the business people. They looking for to be Al-Khobar the top race in the Middle East for future. After 3 years, you will see. This year, now we did half marathon and 5 kilometers. Also, will bring more than 40 or 50 runners between Class A and B runners. We're looking forward to do the whole record of the world, hold record for the half marathon or 5 kilometers. I make very fast route, very fast flat, is nice place. There is no wind. We can, everybody who can watch, go and back the same point. We fixed some mistake. We did it last year. This year is different and especially.
Thanks, Abdullah. I was lucky enough to be at your race a couple of times in the past, and it's really interesting to see how this private sector, private companies really are putting their weight behind the event to make it an opportunity of promoting physical activity. Joe, I wanted to hear from you very briefly your story. How did you end up working in Oman, and then what is the unique business model of the mass participation industry in the Sultanate of Oman, and why is it so distinctive compared with others?
Thanks, Celso. Yeah, I'm in Oman coming up on 6 years now. I guess prior to that with Ironman and IMG, so a lot of mass participation experience across EMEA and Asia. And coming out here to Oman in 2018, the marathon at the time, along with Oman by UTMB, we had an ultra trail race, and we had a mountain bike race and a road cycling race. But that was kind of really, that was it for the country in terms of mass participation races. And I think, listening to Brett talk about Japan earlier, kind of in slight decline, I would say Oman is, and probably the same for a lot of the GCC countries, is we're very much in a phase of growth from a mass participation event perspective. We're seeing participation numbers across swimming, across cycling, but predominantly across running. really grow over the last, particularly over the 3 years kind of post-COVID. We're seeing a lot more community events grow. We're seeing big growth in the major events like the Muscat Marathon. And it's been a really fascinating period kind of to be here and see that growth, because it's been largely driven by Omani nationals. So I think that's been probably the most fascinating piece for me is listening to Simon talk about the changes in Riyadh. And while the changes haven't been, say, as dramatic here in Oman, there has definitely been I guess a love for mass participation because of the inclusive nature. You're seeing organic running groups created amongst groups of friends within the corporate environment. So we're really seeing, there isn't a huge kind of network of running clubs like we might see in the West. And we're seeing these community groups grow quite organically. And I think in Muscat particularly, if you go out any evening along the beaches and the parks, you're going to see a lot of groups of men, women, kids, mixed groups out running together. So it's definitely an exciting period in Oman for mass participation sport and running in particular.
John, my follow-up question here would be, if you were to give me a breakdown of Omani locals, like Omani nationals versus expats who live there versus people traveling from overseas at, say, the Muscat Marathon, what would be the spread?
So in the event in January, which was the 11th edition, we had just shy of 13,000 entries, of which 9,300 were Omani nationals. So it's a very healthy number. I think what's been really interesting to see is the growth of or say move towards a balance of male-female participation. In 2019, we would have had it was 82% male, 18% female, and in January of this year we had 65% male and 35% female. So there's been a huge growth in women's running, and when we look at the distances, where we've seen the real growth in Omani nationals participating and the females in particular has been in the 5 and the 10K. So our focus in the coming years in terms of growth, because our marathon is very flat, at about 350 participants. We've seen some growth in the half marathon, but not as aggressive as we've seen the growth in the 5 and the 10K. So our focus now is going to be on how do we get those Omani nationals to take that next step in their running journey, to step up from 5 to 10 or from 10 to 21. And ultimately, we want to get a bigger percentage of that Omani national database participating in a marathon over the coming years.
Yeah, Joe, I couldn't agree more with your point. As World Athletics, we are often contacted by, some national athletics associations or some groups of people who like the sport of running saying, would you help us do a marathon? And my gut reaction is, why do you really have to do a marathon? Why don't we start with a 5K or a 10K? Also because in some parts of the world, it's never going to be viable to do a marathon commercially, but also in terms of road closure. So I totally like what you're doing there.
Yeah. And I think, Alessio, when we spoke last year, one of the ideas that you put to me, which we're really discussing now, is, we're seeing more and more 15K races. So having that kind of additional step between 10 and 21. And I think that's something that we will start to see growth in, because of the success of the kind of running festival in Muscat, we'll call it. We've also launched 12 10K races across the country. So to try and get the people in the regions outside of Muscat actively participating in running events as well. And I think that's only going to be healthy for the nation, but for the industry as well within Oman.
Thanks, Joe. Before we go to Luca, I have a question for Ahmed. Ahmed, you organize the marathon, the full event in a major regional capital. Would you tell us briefly the history of the event and who owns the event?
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Alessio. Of course, we've been involved in a couple of events in the region, like Kuwait Gulf Bank Marathon, Riyadh Marathon as well, Jeddah Half Marathon, and other events in the region. So yes, definitely the region is growing. It has really a great impact on growth of running events in particular. And I second Joseph's point of view in terms of the short distances. We're focusing mainly on the short distances because, for most of the runners or athletes, it's new to the sport. So even strategically, we're trying to promote the shorter distances. And even we see a gradual growth in the longer distance, year by year. But our main objective is basically to motivate the people who are staying at home to start being physically active. And then, once they get hooked with the excitement and the adrenaline rush of being physically active, then, we're trying to, they definitely, trying to challenge themselves for a longer distances. On the other hand, we fully focus on the experience of the events because, just to make it fun. So, they enjoy the day out, mainly of the competitive landscape of the event. However, there is a professional athletes, there is serious runners. But I think this is a strategy where we're working on because we want to promote the healthy living for the community first, and then we can focus on the competitive. We share maybe as 72% of the participation are locals, and the female start to growing now. We have 46% actually female, which is quite impressive. Yes.
I think the gold standard is the Chicago Marathon there. Each time I see data about male-female ratio, the Chicago Marathon is one of those who rank the highest. Sorry, go ahead.
Right.
So Luca, thanks, Ahmed. Luca, you come from a slightly different, well, radically different background, big transnational event marketing company, deciding to jump on a business opportunity of doing some events in other parts of the world. Would you describe us how this all came about?
So first of all, thank you, Alessio, and it's very good to see some familiar faces here in the panel, in the discussion. Yeah, just a quick introduction. As RCS, we organize the Giro d'Italia, which is our main event. But as you were saying, like years ago, we started and we had the opportunity to work in the UAE. So we founded our company there. A branch of the company there, and we've been lucky to work first with the Dubai Sports Council, and then with the Abu Dhabi Sports Council, and then with the RAC TDA. So just going back to the main topic, we've organized on behalf of the Abu Dhabi Sports Council the ADNOC Abu Dhabi Marathon, and honestly, we've been lucky enough to testify since day one this event. And if I look back to 2018 when we started with the first edition, I see like we've had a long journey. We started with 10,000 participants already on the first edition, but if we look back last year, we had among all the distances like more than 25,000 participants, which is from our side is a massive number. Just like touching base to what also the other guests were saying for us, and this is like sharing the view of the Abu Dhabi Sports Council. The idea for this event, the base was just to give a reason to people to go out and to start their running journey, just at the end of the day to promote a healthy lifestyle. This was the main reason behind the event, which is it's like a great idea, but we've seen across all the UAE in the last 10 years, I believe there for 8 years, there is like an incentive to do sport, which is massive. I've never seen something like that, even in Europe. So everyone is pushed to do sport. Everyone is pushed to go out and do physical activity. So the marathon has been for the city of Abu Dhabi like one of the key events pushing this. And as I was saying, like we started, like a funny fact is that we started with the route from we started since day one with the marathon. And that was like kind of tough in terms of organizing it, putting together all the authorities, police, traffic, like everyone at the same table was quite challenging at the beginning. And if I see how like this has changed, how the route has changed. Now we embrace literally all the city. We start from one point, we go up to the other side of the city where the Grand Mosque is, and then back to the Corniche. Like the commitment of the city, the commitment of all the authorities is something which is really unbelievable. And this is like something that honestly you don't always see even in Europe, which is like something that makes us proud of being on the side of the Abu Dhabi Sports Council in the organization of this event. So the transition of the event for us has been from like sport point of view, also now like the claim and what we try to achieve every time is to bring all the community together. So the 5 days of the event, starting from the village and then all the events on Saturday, is really like a celebration of the community for us, where all the nationalities, they gather together in one day, but specifically like is a 1 year journey where we train together. We have different running clubs. Now we have like several training sessions across all the UAE, where the spirit is to bring people together, to run. So this is like what is the main reason behind, and how the main, how can I say, the goal behind this event. Just to bring some nationalities also, which I think can summarize also, like I put down all the top 5 nationalities that are represented in our event: India, Philippines, UAE with a 15%, people from UK and Pakistan, which at the end summarize like all the biggest nationalities which are in UAE and in Abu Dhabi especially. And then thinking along what other guests were saying also from us, what we see is like a 65% male and a 35% female in terms of participation. I just want to say a number which for us is like we are extremely proud, and that brings to something else, is the number of marathon runners that we had. We started from 2018 with only 800 runners. This year, I mean, last year we had
full marathon.
Marathon, yeah, only the marathon. We had like 2,400 marathon runners, and this is very good. And for this Abu Dhabi Sports Council, one of the main reasons, let's say, is also to be able to attract people and tourists from abroad to come and discover more about the city, more about like the Emirate, and discover all the sightseeing that there is the opportunity. Plus it's December the race, so it's perfect weather to be there and enjoy and run away from the winter time.
Well, we aren't having that much of a winter anymore in Europe, at least. So Luca, thanks. And if I understand you correctly, you're saying that the involvement of the public sector isn't just high. They also seem to be quite clear about what policy objectives they are trying to address with the marathon: tourism, promoting physical activity, and also putting Abu Dhabi even further on the map of global sport. Ehrabi, when we were preparing yesterday, instead, you told me that in another capital city in the region, the situation is radically different, and the involvement of the government is at best limited. Would you tell us more about that?
Yes, in Beirut, in Lebanon, the situation is quite different. The public sector, the country, they have more issues, present issues regarding economics, way of life, so they don't care much about the sports. The only support that we will get is road closures on event day. Even with that, we're finding problems in recent events because the number of policemen that they can spare on the grounds is getting lower and lower every event. So they're pushing us to go for shorter races, that road closures will be much less time, if not like the marathon, because for the marathon we close the roads maybe 8 to 9 hours from preparation to the final runner arriving, whereas in a 10K we will close the roads for like maybe 2 hours tops. We've even tried to shift our events to make them point-to-point races, just to be able to open the roads gradually, not to suffocate the city more. We're planning more 10K races instead of doing more half marathons, just because the support that we're going to get for a 10K, closing the city for a 10K, is much more appreciated than the support we're going to get for a marathon. Over the years, we had to shift the course, changed the course multiple times, just because there are regions in the city that the government doesn't want us to close because they fear, from the public perspective, they don't want the streets near their houses closed. So it's quite different than what we see in the UAE or even in Europe, but we have to endure it.
Thanks, Ehrabi. I would like to ask another round of questions to all the panelists here, and it's going to be more or less the same question to everyone, starting with you, Simon. And let's try to keep this within 40-45 seconds each. Where do you see the industry, the sport going in your country, in the territory you operate in the next, let's say, 5 years? What do you think the further evolution of this will be?
Good, we are still in the starting situation from my perspective. I think we will see more of the non-traditional running events to attract more people, and I think this is also needed. We are organizing non-traditional running events with 50-50 male-female split and many first-timers. And then I think the Riyadh Marathon will attract more cities to also have a marathon. If this is healthy or not, it's not my question, but I surely will see that coming.
So non-traditional, what do you mean by non-traditional running event?
It's like non-sanctioned, like night running events, obstacle races, music running events, something like that. A challenge that we are facing, and I'm not sure if that will be handled already within the next 5 years, is that community sports groups, non-profit organizations can organize running events because of the legal structure that we have in Saudi. So it's depending heavily. So there's a shift, surely a shift from government side to private sector, but that transition needs a little bit of time. It cannot go from one day to another.
Mm-hmm. Fascinating. Abdullah, what do you see in the next 5 years? What do you want the Al Khobar charity race to become? I think you're on mute, Abdullah.
Sorry. I think the last meeting I made it with you, with Mr. Abdulaziz, the people, how they excited to be the race from the world calendar or under the World Federation, and you want to grow about Khobar to be the top 3 or top 2. They're looking to be like a Valencia, like the races they did it before many years ago. Actually, now we are grow step by step. Next year we'll see different also. We'll make also 10K maybe in Jubail and under the running race company. This year we'll do half marathon and 5 kilometer. Maybe in the future we're looking forward to do full marathon in Al Khobar or Dammam, because it's very close. Dammam Al Khobar, like 3 kilometer between this city, or yeah. So I think the people, they're excited to be improved year after year.
Thank you. From what I read online, I also understand that the Saudi Olympic Committee is really investing considerably in high performance sport. They want to perform very well in Paris, with the potential view at hosting the Olympics themselves in a not so distant future. Joe, what's next for Oman Sail? How do you see this space evolving?
So I think what I see for Oman, and a big part of my role now across the different sports in the government, is the growth of the private sector and the kind of empowerment and enablement of the private sector, because we've always been very, very heavily kind of government reliant, whether that's funding or or kind of ideas, ambition. It's always been driven directly by government, and delivered by government entities. We've gone through the kind of privatization of the marathon over the last 2 years, and we'll finalize that transition next year. So I see big growth over the next 5 years in terms of the private sector companies in Oman, largely SME driven, that will look to build events probably outside of Muscat in the regions, because that's where we will start to see the population growth in some of the cities that are developing around the port network that Oman has along its coastline. So I can see the growth of mass participation sport, and again, running, kind of rooted in running in places like Sohar, Duqm, Salalah. So the regional growth, the private sector growth, and I guess an ambition for me that I would love to see is the development of our kind of elite road running program, because we have a lot of very active competitive athletes. We've got regions here in the mountains that go up to 3,000 meters, so we can kind of train and live at altitude like we see in East Africa. And I would love to see the development of an elite road running program for Omani nationals and see us compete on an international level.
And it's a beautiful terrain for off-road running. I may be biased here, but that's another development that probably will happen in the region. Luca and then Ahmed, major capitals, what is next for mass participation running in big capital cities in the region?
Giving a prediction of what is going to happen in the UAE in the next 5 years is going to be like very complicated, as there is a change every day. So it's very tough to see. But from my side, what I think is, especially for the mass participation and for running, is like for the ADNOC Abu Dhabi Marathon to be even more and more like one of those key events for the, if you look from a community side, where people that just like they sign it on their calendar year after year, so where they look forward for that event to happen. Like, for example, the F1 or all those big events which have been there now for more than 20 years. So from a community side, and we're working also with schools, and this is like our view to promote running and to always promote like the event as the big destination and the big moment for the year. And then, of course, on the international side, we always dream big. So why not like the ADNOC Abu Dhabi Marathon to be like among one of those biggest marathons in the world where people really want to go. The calendar is just perfect. There are not many events in December, so we really want to promote the event and the event to be like one of those events where people want to go, travel, and just like spend some days as in a place where they bring their family, they bring their friends, and they just enjoy like a nice holiday running.
And the city certainly has the brand strength to do that. Ahmed, what's next in Kuwait?
Yeah, I think we're gonna see a growth in the upcoming years. Since I think more than 52% from the population under 25 years old. So it's a very young community. So we need to spend more effort on grassroots programs and how we can really emphasize on living a healthy life through different activities. As I said, we're pushing hard in order to make it fun, so they can change the perception of sport as something fun to do. And definitely these youngsters are going to grow one day, and then they can adapt more into healthy living. So and this is not only in Kuwait, in the region. We are in a very young region, so there is a potential, but there is a lot of hard work need to be done. There is a lot of alliances should be done with the government as well to align in this mission. In Kuwait specifically, we're taking this on our commitment. We don't see any good support from the government. However, we're pushing hard to align. But I think we are on the right direction because I think there is no other way.
Yep, and this theme of a really young population is one that is common across several countries in the region.
Right.
Ehrabi, and what evolution do you see in distance running in our sport in Lebanon?
We've been working for the past 10 years in increasing the number of runners in the region. We created training programs for them in Lebanon to have this increase. We're even starting doing small races for youth in rural areas just to spread the culture of running. We spread even the distances from 1 mile up to the 42-kilometer race. So we're trying to grow back our numbers back to 2018, which we reached 50,000 on marathon day in one event. So hopefully in the next 5 years, we're gonna reach those numbers and maybe go back higher.
And hopefully also promote the beautiful city of Beirut as a destination marathon.
Yeah,
it would be a dream. Gentlemen, thank you so much, not just for being on the show today, but for the leadership that all of you are demonstrating in your countries. It's incredible. 10 years ago, we probably would have been not in a position to have this conversation. So really, from World Athletics, thank you for your leadership and contribution to the sport in the GCC area. And over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Alessio. Some really fascinating insights there. Big thank you, Abdullah, Ahmed, Simon, Luca, Ehrabi, Joseph and Alessio for hosting that panel. Thank you, Sam, as I see you appearing on screen, for setting up that WhatsApp chat group during that session so we can have better collaboration. Thanks for that. I've seen a couple of people raising their hands, the digital hands. The way to communicate, please, you're not able to communicate verbally on these sessions. So if you've got any question or comments, put them in the chat or Q&A. There was a comment and a question there from Julian Weyman. We are quite tight for time because a couple of our speakers, Julian, have to head off to other commitments. So I will ask the panelists that were on that panel, if any of them are still on, if they wouldn't mind responding to your question in the chat. As I welcome Sam Browne, who's the co-founder and CEO of Let's Do This, and he will be joined shortly by Hugh Brasher, who's the race director of the TCS London Marathon. They're going to share a presentation and some conversation with us. The sky's the limit. How Let's Do This help the TCS London Marathon reach 840,000 applications. Hello, Sam. Hello, Hugh. Hand the stage to you.
Thanks so much, Chris, and thank you to everyone for being here. The conversations already have been absolutely amazing. Fully aware that everyone is much more interested to hear than from me, quite rightly. So I'll do a very short introduction to Let's Do This. I started as a race director and was frustrated that there wasn't really technology to properly help you scale and grow events and sell tickets. So we started Let's Do This in 2017 as a registration provider and consumer marketplace, really focusing on one thing, which is to help people grow their events. We've been very fortunate to raise $100 million around that in capital, happily all in equity. We have no debt, and that's really allowed us to invest a huge amount in product teams and tech teams from the likes of Google and Meta and Deliveroo and some of the top tech teams in the world. Very excitingly, we've recently been joined by Mary Wittenberg as our US general manager, and we've been very lucky to have the support of some really exceptional athletes. Today, we've started and really focused in the UK, and we now run the registration and the growth systems for the majority of the events in the UK, and in particular in the centre there, London Marathon events, who it's been such a privilege to get to work with them as they've sort of just continued to set the standard for what can be achieved in our industry. And we're really focused now in scaling out in the US, so supporting races like Honolulu Marathon, the Atlanta Track Club with Peachtree coming up on the 4th of July, which will be amazing. And most recently launching last week was Ragnar Relay. So as we've been hearing, the participation events industry is absolutely booming. And it is just sort of wonderful news and huge thanks to everyone on this call for all of the work. Like, I think an industry like ours requires a large number of very, very passionate people to drive it forward. And I think it's just a huge credit to everyone's endurance that after some of the brutalities of the pandemic, that we're in this fantastic new dawn, and we definitely sort of see this continuing. So 2024 is the first time we've seen bookings higher than 2019. And we're really seeing this resurgence coming through really, really excitingly. And particularly we're excited about the real investments and coming through from younger runners. I think a lot of the conversations I was having even 12 to 18 months ago was, where is Gen Z? Why are we not getting these younger communities taking part? And I think through a lot of investments from a lot of people in technology, in inclusivity, in community, and in the next generation of our industry, and in the youth groups that are there, and again, something that Hugh will touch on, we're really seeing that growth coming through now. And you just see over the last 3 years this sort of huge growth coming through from those younger communities, which is obviously fantastic to see. And the average event on Let's Do This grew by more than 20% last year. And the acceleration is even faster into 24, seeing a lot of events growing between 45 and 55% year on year. But really what I wanted to focus on was what can I sort of share from what we're seeing working to help those people on the call who do have events to really make the most of the growth opportunities that are currently out there. So wanted to share a few learnings on that, and then hand over to Hugh to talk about the London Marathon in particular. So the first really key point is that ticket sales are essentially just traffic times conversion rate. And yet we see a huge number of races not being open for next year's registration during their race weekend. That essentially means that at your highest traffic point of the year, when people are coming and checking your website the most, when people are engaging with photos, with race times, the conversion rate is 0% because bookings are closed. We'd really encourage everyone to think about, can they get the operations and working with their technology partners, the tech in place to open next year's race, ideally the day before this year's edition. This is something that London Marathon has done to phenomenal success. And as Hugh spoke about, we went through the world record that we set last year with the London Marathon team in only slightly over 3 days. So really on the Monday after Marathon Sunday, we've seen very similar results this last weekend with Hackney Half Marathon, which has a huge new record. And this can really help you also deal with one of the data points we're seeing early with these very late in the cycle bookings, which can make operations and financial planning so difficult. One of the stats that we have here is that 75% of events on Let's Do This that are more than 20% up year over year, 6 months out, will continue and finish their sales cycles well over 20%. And this really means that they have better cash flow. There's more cash coming in earlier. It's more predictable. They know where things are going to be. And really, as we come on to a future point around how you can make your participants into promoters, the earlier those people are booking, the more they're going to go and tell their friends about it, and the more they're going to get organized around that race. So I think this is such a huge opportunity for everyone to be thinking about, and something that we only see about 5 to 6% of the industry currently doing. Secondly, discounts and reserved entries. I think combining with that launch on event day, thinking really strongly about discounts and tiered pricing is seriously important. I know there's some communities that think about, well, we don't want to devalue our brand by having cheaper prices earlier on. In reality, the upside that you get from getting these people committed early is truly additive and is truly driving upside there. The process we're seeing work best at the moment is to have significant discounts. So they need to be 15% plus. As far as like how this thing is ratcheting through, and then time bounding them, or even better, to release them in tranches. So up until about 18 months ago, we were seeing time bounding, i.e. prices are going up on this date, working best. What we're seeing work best in the industry now is to say these are the last 400 or 500 tickets of this tranche. That really does two things. It drives FOMO and drives the fear of missing out. But it also allows you the opportunity on the back end to, if you are selling a tranche really well and you want to extend the tranche, you can extend that tranche and release more tickets into that price point. Whereas if you have purely time bound, you really need to stick with that, because the most loyal members of your community will notice if you start sort of changing that up. Next is cross-sell and upsell, which again is something we don't see a lot of organizers doing across the sort of industry, global industry that we track. We see about 15% of organizers doing this, but the impact is really big. Taking those participants that have experienced how amazing your race is and your brand is, and cross-selling them onto other events at the point that they're signing up and at the point of checkout is a huge win. It's something that we've invested a huge amount in with multi-buy and with post-booking purchases. And it's something we're going to continue to really dive in on, because we're seeing a lot of returns. On average, organizers are seeing over 20% of participants coming through this cross-sell channel. And increasingly, with those really big marquee events doing extremely well, people are seeing that they really need to start sharing their demand across different events and different parts of their events portfolio. London has done this phenomenally successfully with the Brighton Marathon, and I think this is something for everyone to be really trying to dial in on as part of their marketing strategy, because selling your other maybe less popular events alongside your most popular events can really help spread that growth right across your portfolio, and not just ending with one event that is such a standout, but you're not filling everything else. This point is something that we couldn't feel more passionately about, and is where we're going to be spending a huge amount of our investments over the sort of coming months and quarters, which is really try and make your participants your marketers. Engage and reward those passionate customers, gamify it, provide rewards, provide opportunities for them to really encourage their friends to go. something, as I'll come on to, that Chris could not have been more right about earlier, was that this next community of runners is really engaging around a shared experience and how they can actually have that with their friends and with their loved ones, much more than can they go and run a faster time or can they go and run a faster race. So really making sure those key participants are entered into your races early, and then leveraging them and spending a lot of time communicating with that sort of core group to use them as your core marketers, particularly with those younger demographics, is what we've seen most successfully in running those areas of Gen Z. A key part as well about how you consider this is something which has been known on the internet for a long time, is that obviously mobile is hugely overtaking desktop. And in our data, 73% of all sessions are on mobile, and that maps onto also bookings. I think there was this opinion for a long time around, well, yes, they might be looking on mobile, but they're going to go and book on desktop. That's definitely not the case now. They're booking on mobile. And yet most of the organizers, when we see how they're planning their CRM or how they're planning their sites or their registration flows, are still doing it all on desktop because that's where they're working. It's really important to, across your organization, ensure that everyone is working mobile first. The penultimate point from me is we wouldn't be a tech company in 2024 without encouraging everyone to be engaging with AI. But I think AI is going to help our industry hugely further as people do spend more and more on experiences and move more and more that way. But it's something which we really think is important to start encouraging all of your teams to be experimenting with. We think every organization will see huge increases in efficiency over the next really 12 to 18 months by really embracing with AI. We're seeing over a 30% uplift in efficiency at Let's Do This from starting to really use these tools. With 5 coming out and with sort of the amount of volume of cash being spent on this area, it is really something to try and drive literacy with your teams to get them to engage it early, especially across marketing and customer service. And as I sort of move towards handing over to Hugh, what we've really seen with London and what they've done an amazing job of driving is that accessibility is the key to long-term growth. These new runners and these younger generations, they care so much about your races and experiences being inclusive. They care about it being a shared experience. They care, it's not only the sort of people in underrepresented communities that want to make sure they're included within this. Everyone demands and cares about making sure those people are included. I think it's amazing listening to the stat from the amazing representative in Saudi about female participation there, and Hugh will come on to some of the female participation numbers in London's ballot this year. But the more that as an entire industry we can really be investing in how can we make these experiences, how can we make these community centric, and how can we make this truly inclusive and really make sure everyone feels welcome. And just one specific stat here is that the whole nature of having a login wall can really start off making someone feel like, oh, well, I don't have an account here, or I'm not part of this community. It can really not make people feel welcome there. We've seen conversion rates drop off by as much as 50% for every single person and organizer that we've had come across where we've sort of taken that login wall out, and would really encourage people to move away from hard login walls, which, yes, were the norm in the early 2000s, but really aren't the norm anywhere else now, and are definitely a very negative signal to younger communities in particular. Now, delighted to introduce, and Hugh, thank you so much for taking the time, Hugh Brasher, the race director at London Marathon Events, to talk through the amazing success they had at this year's race and with this year's ballot.
Thanks, everyone. I think there are going to be a lot of slides with a few pieces of data, but actually I'm going to start with a correction to this slide, and actually one of the things that is so important and might sound odd. I am not the race director, I'm the event director. The London Marathon is not a race, it is an event. And the more that you think about that, the more that you think about how you want to create an amazing, life-affirming, community representing event, the more that you'll be on the right track. Because as Sam said, the new market, the biggest market, the youngest market, It's about how they feel. It's about how your event makes them feel. When it comes to women, they are far less likely to race. They are far more likely to want to appreciate the amazingness of an event. So if there's one thing I can leave you with, it is make sure that you create something that truly makes people happy, truly makes them joyous, and truly brings them together. Sam, go to the next slide, please. So a little bit of data. You know, the London Marathon for the 2025, it's our 45th year. And I think that just celebrating an anniversary, you know, there are lots of different things that our team have done. And there is not one single thing that is leading to this incredible 840,000 people that applied for the 2025 TCS London Marathon. But firstly, it's the 45th year. That does help. They know that we're going to do something special because our team already showed the medal that people would be getting for the 45th year. And so we started already pre-event to build excitement for next year's event. And as Sam said, we actually open registration for our biggest events the day before our current event is open. So we're doing that for Ride London. We have 50,000 cyclists over 3 days taking part this coming weekend. Both professional, this is Forward Ride London, both professional women cyclists. It's a 3-day event, and there's families and kids cycling around the centre of London on traffic-free roads, 8 miles, and then more than 20,000 cyclists cycling 100 miles, 60 miles or 30 miles. And again, that event registration is open on Saturday before the event on Sunday. But we were delighted with the female statistics, up to 49%. And the growth in that has surprised us, but particularly in the 20 to 29 year age group, which went up 105%, as it says here, and now account for the second highest number of people in any age group. So we split age group in under 20, so 18 and 19-year-olds, and then 10-year increments, 20 to 29, 30 to 39, etc. So the two highest are now 30 to 39 and followed by 20 to 29. And on current trajectory, 20 to 29 will smash, will become the highest number of applicants. But I think that is because how we have made people feel, how the crowd feel. We know that in a marathon, people are going to go through a hard time. We know that they are going to, it's difficult. But what we have done above anything else is try and ensure that we are truly representing one of the founding goals that my father and John Disley put into the London Marathon 43 years ago. And that was to show that in a somewhat troubled world, the family of humankind can come together in a joyous occasion. And that was what I spoke about at the start. We are being forced apart by social media. We're being forced apart by wars. We're being forced apart by the media. But in reality, our similarities are much greater than our differences. And marathon running helps people to understand those similarities. And that is so much what these 20 to 29-year-olds are looking for. They are less likely in the UK to drink alcohol, 40% reduction in the amount of alcohol they're drinking, but they want to stay together. They want to have a good time. So allow them and facilitate that. Obviously, an incredible number of international applicants. And, I do think being part of Abbott World Marathon Majors, that is, the race directors of, that's the races of New York, Tokyo, Chicago, Berlin, Boston, coming together, and we've created this 6-star program. Hopefully with Sydney this year, it will become a 7-star program. And we know that there are people traveling around the world massively looking to be part of that community. Sam, if you could move on again. As Sam said, incredibly, we beat the world record on Monday and we stopped any advertising. So it sounds incredible that we decided, this is, I think I have some pretty wild dreams, but this was beyond my wildest dream. So obviously I need to improve the quality of my dreams is all I'm saying. But yeah, we turned the advertising off. We stopped marketing the event because it was going to get embarrassing about how many people we could fit in the event. And I think that one thing that Sam mentioned, but then didn't mention, he mentioned how important it was to open your event on the day or the day before next year's event. But what that also actually allows you to do is to get more runners in your event, because we have proven that the earlier the person enters, the less likely they are to turn up. Now, that might be because they're injured. That might be because they've moved house. That might be because a whole host of different reasons. But the later that you allow entries, the more likely someone is to turn up. So we actually, to get the 53,874 probably number of entries, had to disqualify one yesterday. To get that number of finishers, we let in 70,000 runners. That's 70,000 runners paying money. And what we know when we're tracking something, if you start ahead on your journey, pretty well this graph, if you show the year on year, the bumps are in exactly the same place. It is unbelievable. I've been effectively involved in organizing races for over 20 years. And these graphs on year hardly change. There will be things going on geographically, things going on in the season that will drive behavior. Yes, your marketing will do it, but fundamentally, if you start off well, you'll probably finish well. Thank you, Sam. And I think this is really important. One of the things in moving to Let's Do This and Sam's team was we tried to make it incredibly easy for people to enter, and easy in ask as little questions as possible. We actually have a 2-stage process. One is if you want to enter, give us the simple details that you can. We'll go back and get the rest of the details later. And with this number of applications that we got, Sam and his team have spent a huge amount of time on ensuring that the tech stack behind the technology has the ability to scale up to the level that is unparalleled in this industry, but ensures that we don't end up with a queue. That the longest someone, I think, had to wait for an entry, I think, Sam, might have been 90 seconds.
Yeah, between Saturday and Monday, I think we had something like 600,000 entries, fewer than 100 people saw a queue, and the longest that anyone was in the queue was 12 seconds.
Yeah, so your event will be inspiring people. TCS, Tata Consultancy Services, the app downloads were world record number of app downloads for any running event. 653,000 people downloaded the app, and those, if they had push notifications turned on, those people who are watching the event, who are getting inspired, were then getting notifications about would they like to enter next year. So absolutely keep it simple, but make sure that the technology behind it is first class and will stand up to a lot of people entering. Sam, if you could move on, thanks. And again. So we've already talked a little bit about women. We've talked a little bit about the younger audiences. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, and opening up the London Marathon to more audiences is something that we've been doing since 2017. We haven't talked a great deal about it, but we will be talking about it enormously in 2025. If you go back to the first London Marathon in 1981, less than 5% of the finishers were women. Virtually all of the finishers were white. Nearly all of them were stick-thin, skinny old blokes in very dodgy shorts. And that's a very British phrase, so I'm not sure how well that might work around, but they were very, very short shorts, and they probably should have been wearing longer ones. That's the best way to describe it. Not a pretty sight. But if you cannot see it, you cannot believe it. And what the London Marathon has become is a sea of humanity, a sea of normal people, a sea of all ages, of all abilities, of all disabilities, doing something that is fundamentally crazy. Running 26.2 miles is not normal, but it becomes normal because they see people that look like them. And our team did an amazing 5-minute video, VT, of an incredible young runner, aged 19, called Lloyd Martin. So he broke the Guinness World Record as for the youngest runner with an intellectual impairment to run a marathon. He ended up with over 21 million hits on social media. His story, the story of his mum, went viral. One of the second biggest stories was about Fred. Fred is 86, and Fred took 13 hours and 10 minutes to finish the TCS London Marathon. He was doing it for charity, but taking experiences that we've had from the New York City Marathon. So again, what we do is through our network, we go to other events and we take great ideas from them, because everybody else always has ideas that you can take to your event. So we gave a terrible experience in 2019 to the people that we were trying to inspire the most, the slowest people, the people at the back. And pretty well we were hosing them down with detergent to clear up the blue line on the course. That's what our contractors were doing. What we now do is we give them support, and other runners give them support. And we open a secondary finish line, because we have to get off the Mall. It's the Queen's Road. We have to get off that. And we give them a finish on St. James's Park. We have DJs playing for them. And that finish is open until 23:59 and 59 seconds. But actually, Fred was 10 minutes away. How heartless would that have been to have shut the line? We could have, but actually, the team decided to leave it open. That gets covered by the BBC. That shows people, even at 86, you can challenge yourself to something that seems crazy, that is crazy, but is going to give you a feeling of joy, of inclusion, and of something that is very hard to replicate. So I'll leave you with one other statistic, and I've not really followed Sam's slides, but that's life. we really try to make sure that there's something called the Net Promoter Score, which basically asks your customers, would they recommend your event? How would they grade you? And it scores out of 10. And if you score 10, 9, I think it's 8, you get a +1. If you score 7 or 6, you get 0. And if you score anything below that, you get -1. It is phenomenal for any brand to get a Net Promoter Score of 70. In the TCS London Marathon, each of the last 2 years, we have a Net Promoter Score of 88. So we really try and make sure that what we do is give an individual experience to every runner in a mass participation world. And we challenge ourselves to be better every year to improve that experience. And I think that we work with the Marcel Altenberg at Manchester Metropolitan University, who is a genius and who does crowd modeling. And what we can say for a fact is that people running the 2024, the 53,000, the second biggest marathon in the history of marathon running in the world, was less crowded than it was in 2019 when we had 20% less people. And we've done that through changing the start and through changing the process that people go through. And so trying to ensure that we give an amazing experience. And it is not, in terms of how big we will take the London Marathon, we're actually not worried about the participants. We're actually worried about, has London got the infrastructure to move them around? Every single runner brings more than 5 people on average to the race. And the genius that John Disley in creating the London Marathon and creating that course was he followed the river and he followed London's transport system. And people are moving. It is a sea of 250,000 people moving across London to follow their runners. And it is that crowd support. It is the work that the charities do. It is the work that our sponsors and partners do to activate the course that makes it such an incredibly positive experience. And this doesn't happen for 1 year. I've been lucky enough to be in this job for the last 12 years, but the previous 34 years have led to this 840,000 figure. So thank you very much for being here. And I just think together, what we can do in learning off each other, visiting each other's races, listening to each other, it's great that we're in a better position, but the world needs to run. It is good for our physical health. It's good for our mental health. The opportunities are enormous if we work together. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Hugh. Chris, back to you in the studio.
Thanks very much, Hugh. Thanks, Sam. Great inspiration and information there. Really appreciate it. Thanks for making the time, and couldn't agree with you more about event. I must admit, I've been saying for years, we've got to stop talking about being race directors and racers and focus on the fact that we're delivering events and experiences. So definitely on the same page, Hugh. Thank you so much to both of you as we move on to our next segment and hopefully are able to get a few minutes with Norrie Williamson, who's sitting on a plane patiently about to take off from Johannesburg in South Africa. Norrie, if you can join us together with Dagmawit Amare, who's the general manager of the Great Ethiopian Run, and Beatrice Ayikoru, who's a council member for World Athletics, general secretary of the Uganda Athletics Federation. Norrie, as you show us the view out the window, let's welcome Dagmawit and Beatrice. But Norrie, I know you're about to take off, so this segment is titled "The Pace is Building New Races and Emerging Markets in Africa." Over to you quickly before your plane takes off.
Yeah, literally very quickly, because I'm actually about to taxi. But what Hugh said really struck me on events. One of the new events that's coming through in South Africa, we were discussing it yesterday, is this whole idea of bringing fun. And there's an event around a race course, which will have cycling, ultra distance overnight, obviously the pub open, the concerts, it's bringing a craft market, an expo, different type of expo. South Africa has always been, let's see what the new stuff is. This will be much more about giving value to the runners. A whole host of things, people being able to use a skid pad and so on. So the whole thing to bring the communities and different communities, endurance cycling, all together for a 2-day event, which will have and feature 42 kilometers, 15 kilometers, elite mile, recreational mile, school mile, and so on. And I think that is the way that we need to be building our sport. But in Africa as a whole, we have some major problems. Economics is a big problem at present. You take somewhere like the powerhouse of Nigeria, where in the last 6 months, the value of their naira has dropped. To give you an idea, 400 naira about 6 months ago to $1, and now 1,000 plus. So a major problem, and we're seeing that come through in the events this weekend. In fact, I'm flying now to Nigeria for the Okpeke 10K, which about 4 years ago had $26,000 for first prize in a 10K, which is massive for Africa. Now it's down at $15,000. Lagos Marathon 3 years ago, $60,000, down now to $20,000. But at least we have these 2 gold label events. In South Africa, we have a fantastic 10K series, the ABRACEO Run Your City, also the Total Sports Ladies Challenge, which, by the way, sells out every year. We've also the Spar Ladies Challenge. All of these 3 10K series getting the Gen Z approval and numbers, 16,000. Now you've got to put that into perspective when other places are talking about 40,000 people, because Africa as a whole, on average, only has 48 people per kilometer squared. Compare that with Manhattan, which I think is about 28,000. In a city in Africa, you're talking maybe 400,000 or 400 per kilometer squared. And, you know, something like Cape Town in its center is only about 1,000 people per kilometer squared. One of the reasons that Cape Town Marathon is struggling to get more than 15,000, which is the minimum criteria for the Abbott candidate. So we have to understand that. On the positive side, the federations are really beginning to see that there is a need and a benefit of having mass participation. We have Accra starting to come in as a ranking race. But a lot of the federations, a lot of the race organizers cannot afford to invest in a label race because of the value of the dollar as opposed to their local currency. To just sort of highlight that quickly, $1,000 or $1,200 is like 6 months minimum basic wage in an African country. I've just come back from Kenya. There's some very good feedback from there. We had a measurement course, 24 candidates, 10 federations, and 4 women, which is, by the way, the largest number of women course measurers on a course anywhere to date. And of course, unless we have the growth of the number of course measurers, because they are key for that sort of statistic. So, Chris, I'm very, very aware that I'm moving slowly up a runway here, but another big innovation in South Africa is the first ever $1 million rand prize money for a race. Now that is, as you know, as an ex-South African, a massive amount of money to any runner. But in reality, it's only $55,000. So it's not major in world terms. And I think this is one of the problems we've got. We've got great athletes over here, but and the depth of athletes. I mean, you've only got to look at the best top 100 marathon runners in the world. 85 of them probably come from Ethiopia and Kenya. But you know, the trouble is that to make it onto that elite list, you've got to get ranking and you've got to get out there. So we're really having to push ranking as a key desire in Africa. And we've got to find ways to help these athletes move up the ladder. And to say to them, you have to go intercontinental to get the ranking, that's going to be a big problem. So, you know, we need to look at that. The other problem that we've got is actual resources. In Africa, if you're trying to put on a race, probably 8 times out of 10, you have to do it with traffic on the road. Why? There are no roads, there are no alternative roads, there is no public transport, etc. So it is a bit of a...
Well, it looks like we've lost Nori there. Nori, if you can still hear us, thank you for making the effort to join us. Wonderful to get those insights. Safe travels. Let's bring in Beatrice. Thank you for patiently sitting by Beatrice and Daggy to give Nori that chance before he went off. Beatrice, love to get a sense from you what you're seeing. Obviously based in Uganda, new Kampala Marathon coming up. But your insights, obviously, in your World Athletics Council role, you see beyond Uganda. But yeah, just a few minutes of your insights before we come over to Daggy.
Yeah, thank you, Chris, and thank you for giving me this chance to talk to the viewers here. Yes, in Africa, we've seen some kind of a trend of many member federations, or we call the nations, getting involved in the mass participation. We have countries in Southern Africa where we have the South Africa really have well-organized system for mass participation. If you come to the Eastern region where we are, it's a kind of like the running region, you'll call it, because most of the elite athletes come from this region. Then you go to North Africa, a bit of West Africa, where we have Lagos that is trying to come up with some mass participation events. Now, for us in Uganda, we're kind of like picking up for the flow of these mass races happening. We've never had so many events taking place, but of late, we've seen a lot of interest from the private sector and also from the government. And of course, they have the reasons why they try to invest in mass participation. For example, for the government, we have tourism. They're focusing on a strategy of attracting tourists using the mass participation. That's why they're able to invest in mass participation events. While you look at the private sector, they're looking at how do they profile their brands. The brands they have, how can they use running to promote the brands of the products that they have. We also have what we call the civil society organization. These are groups that normally focus on concerns of within a community. It may be on climate, it may be on vulnerability, it may be of food security. So they have also picked up the aspect of trying to ensure that they use mass participation as a means to raise some resources for the charity. Of course, in the recent past, as Uganda, we had an event that was launched by His Excellency, the President of the Uganda. It's a Kampala City Marathon. It's an event where we anticipate where culture will meet sports, where we want to showcase the culture of the country using sports. So we hope that event will be able to meet its objectives. It's a 10-year project with the investment of the government, where we expect to have 4 races. We have the marathon, the 42 kilometers, the half marathon, 10 kilometer, and 5 which are for mass participation. So we hope that event is going to inspire more events to be organized in this country.
Wonderful. And so when does that first event take place, the first Kampala Marathon?
The first edition is scheduled for 1st December. Why 1st December? Because initially we used to have an event which was the MTN Kampala Marathon. That event is sponsored kind of like a pulled out, and they said the brand was not very attractive. So government picked up that, and they're going to invest. It's a 10-year project. The first 4 years will be fully funded by the government of Uganda. We hope along the way, the private sector would be interested to pick up after the 4 years.
Wonderful. Well, all the very best with that. Daggy, wonderful to see you again. Thanks for waiting patiently. You logged on super early today, so you've been sitting in the wings waiting, and wonderful to hear what's happening in Ethiopia and what you see in other countries nearby.
Thank you, Chris. Good to see you as well. And actually, I've learned a lot, especially about the registration system and how they're tackling to mobilize participants, because we all share the same problems. But as you know, we've been doing the Great Ehrabi for the last 23 years. So it's, I think, the biggest 10K in Africa. If it's not, they will tell me. I just want to make sure. So yeah, like Hugh from the London Marathon was saying, our race has always been a running festival. I don't know if you've been here. It has always been a running festival. We're trying always to create memories for all our participants, bringing everyone together through these races. And last month, actually, speaking about East Africa, last month I was in Kenya for a new race, a second edition race in Eldoret. Eldoret is a town where all the runners are coming. So Haile Gebrselassie was telling me Eldoret in Kenya and Bekoji in Ethiopia are the two towns who produces 70% of long distance runners for the world. So we recently started a new race as well in Bekoji. It's actually this coming Sunday. We're traveling soon. So it's a very high altitude place, very beautiful landscape, and the food is good. So it's going to be our third edition. And we started only with 1,000 participants because it's a small town, but producing a lot of elite athletes. So now we're going for 1,500, but amazing spectator, because it's the runners town. It's the origin of runners. That's what we call it. So I was happy to visit Eldoret, where a race is organized by Moses, a previous runner, Moses Tanui. So we were happy to visit the race, Eldoret and Eton. So those are the towns where it's like a manufacturing town of athletes. So it's really amazing. So like even for us, we're moving towards bringing new races to Ethiopia in different regions. We have been doing a half marathon for the past 15 years, but we just renamed it now to Lake Hawas Half Marathon, so that people know that it is a lakeside race. So yeah, we're growing our annual races in Ethiopia as well. But one thing that interests me and I have a passion for is to make these connections in East Africa to Kenya, Uganda. Now it's good to see Beatrice having a race. Maybe our next trip could be to Kigali. So if we have that partnership, you know, it's easier to move around East Africa than to Europe. And because, you know, most of our races, even in Kenya, what I saw is the elite number is very high. The problem here is the fun runner number. So we have to work a lot to develop that. And through that, I feel we'll be developing the media, the broadcasting agencies who will play major roles to promote these sports in Africa, especially because we're very close to East Africa, and that will also give a chance for the athletes to compete, not traveling away. So it was a strong elite field in Kenya, and then we'll have a strong elite field in Bekoji as well. But the people of Bekoji are already passionate about running because the Dibaba family came from Bekoji. Kananisa is from Bekoji. Most of the athletes were from Bekoji. Haile came from 50 kilometers just next door town. So I'm very excited to travel there, and I'm very excited to see these races growing for the athletes as well as for fun runners, for I think we always give running to the athletes only here in East Africa, because we have most of the athletes, so we feel it's their thing, but we're trying to promote running as a festival, running as creating memories. So that's what we've been doing, and I'm very glad to know another race in Kigali. I know there are races in Uganda, new races, especially this 3 years. It's really growing. So it would be my pleasure to create that partnership so that we promote our races in our region, to move people from countries to countries, boost the tourism, boost the sport, boost the media as well. I feel we need a stronger media in this region. So it's exciting. It's exciting time in the past 3 years, even though with the challenge. So yeah, that's how it is here.
Wonderful. And so you've spoken about the races you're involved in. In terms of the ecosystem in Ethiopia, do you see other new events springing up apart from the ones that you're creating? And what do you think are the barriers of fun runners getting involved? You've mentioned a few times that it's more the elite athletes, but not so much the fun runners. Where do you see those barriers, and are there other people putting up new events?
Yes, in the barrier is that, like, you need to put a lot of effort in mobilizing fun runners to participate. So our biggest number is now it's going to be 46,000. But even in other regions, you have to really work hard to mobilize, show what running does, the fun side of it, so that more and more participants can take part. Even though the regions in Ethiopia, other regions, even the population is smaller, so you can't go like 40-something thousand, but we can work on developing the numbers year by year while promoting the benefits of the races, promoting the local tourism. We're not only promoting international tourism, we're promoting local tourism, because Ethiopia has a lot of region that you can travel and discover. So it's a nice way, to have the local tourism through the sport. So those impacts are really improving the participation number. But it's just doing it consistently annually, so that we build the numbers year by year. So for our Awasa race, it's already developed, but Bakoji is already a runner's town, so it's easier to get the people to increase in the fun running community. So it's because that's what I discovered in Eldoret as well. The elite number was high, but the mass was very small. So I was running the race, so I was nervous. I felt like the elites because we were few. But when you do it annually, when you start showing the fun side, that you're creating memories, that's all we want, right? These races are giving fun to the community, something to remember, something nice to be part of. So that's what we're telling participants and as well as sponsors. So this learnings and working hard towards getting the attention of participants and sponsors is gradually increasing the number. That's how we started 23 years ago. So we're going to build more and more races even in Ethiopia, but to sell these races starting from East Africa would be a great opportunity, and then to the rest of the world.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dagi. Let's come back to you, Beatrice, to wrap it up. We're pretty well getting close to out of time, but interested to know, obviously you wear a couple of hats, but the role of federations, and also I wanted to come back the point you made earlier on about brands. So two points in terms of how you see the support of federations maybe linked to governments. So you spoke about private sector and government, the role of government in terms of supporting. You've got this coming up in Kampala, but do you see it happening in other parts of Uganda or in the region where government's getting involved? And then the brands that are getting involved, are they the typical endemic brands, your shoe brands and your apparel brands and the like, or are there other brands that are starting to see the value of mass participation in Uganda?
Yeah, from the perspective of a member federation, having such mass participation is really a commercial property for the member federation to grow the sport in the country. We get the mass participation not only for fun running, for the member federations, we're looking at how we identify talents, how we are able to give opportunities for athletes to compete within their countries or within the region. So that's the interest of the member federation. Of course, we also need to be able to understand that having mass participation, it brings a lot of partnerships. The partnership who will not have got involved in athletics. And once they come in with the idea of promoting tourism or physical activity, there will still be a rip of kind of benefit to the member federation, how they can get partners that they work with when they organize the mass participation. How can they be able to come to support athletics activity which are not related to mass participation? So I think for me, there's a legacy in this mass participation growth. It helps us grow athletics in the member federations. Now, what we need is to make sure that there is the issue of recognition. How can these organizers who are coming from the private sector or from the government, how can they recognize the role of member federation in all of this mass participation? I think it's one of the things that we need to look at. There are always challenges because we have at times weak rules or regulations within the member federation. Maybe the capacities, they may not be able to have a lot of human resource or financial resources in order to support the mass participation events or the private sector. The private sector may have the finance or marshal, but the member federation may not have. They have the rules. How do we make sure that we balance both sides, that we're able to ensure there's that benefit, both for the mutual benefit for the member federation as well as for the private sector? I think those are some of the things that we need to look at. How do we ensure that harmony? Because in some places we've seen events being organized where the organizers don't recognize the member federation. They feel that they have the resources, they don't need them because they have the capacity, because they can be able to bring in human resource outside because they have the resources. So at times it diminishes the role of the member federation in all of this. And I think there's need for us to ensure that these two, the product, which is the athletics, the running is the athletics product. How do we make sure that the private sector appreciates that? How do we make sure that the governments come in to support the member federation to strengthen the systems? So I think the aspect of building capacity of member federation is key. How do we build in-country capacity? At times you see when we organize some of these events, there's a lot of cost. How do we make sure these are affordable, they're accessible to the member federation or to those local promoters who may want to organize such events? For example, timing in Africa, I've seen most of the timing, the results management or timing are coming outside Africa. That's a cost implication. How do you make sure the infrastructure? Because early on, my colleague from Ethiopia talked about the infrastructure. Yes, there are limited roads. There are places where you need to keep the security of the athlete to make sure where they run is safe. But in some of the countries in Africa, the roads are limited. They may not be in very good condition, but the federations or the private sector cannot fix this. It has to be government. That's where the government comes in. We need to make sure that government plays its role. Whether you organize such event for promoting your brand, at the end of the day, it's going to promote the country. It's going to profile your country. So I think it's very important for us to have engagement, discussions, negotiation with the government to say, yes, we organize a mass participation for our different regions, but at the end of it, it's going to be the government that's going to benefit. So the investment into mass participation is very key. And also for that to happen, there must be strong systems in the member federation, strong system in the country, and ensure that all that I can call tripartite arrangement between the government, member federation, and the private sector works very well.
A very multifaceted collaboration that we've spoken about, collaboration across the region. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Beatrice and Daggy, for making the time and for your insights, and look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Thank you very much. As we move on to our next segment, which is also a panel, I'm going to stay in the seat to host this one as well. It's titled LATAM Flying High, Updates from South America. Delighted to be welcoming Soledad Zongaro, who's the General Manager, NB Urbana International Circuit. Guilherme Celso, who's the President of ABRACEO, the Brazilian Association of Road Racers and Outdoor Sports Organizers, and an old friend of MPW, Daniel Krutman, the CEO of Ticket Sports. Welcome, Daniel. Welcome, Guilherme. Let's kick off. Daniel, I know that you've got a couple of slides with some statistics, some great data that you've got from Ticket Sports. So let's throw to you to get started, please.
Yes, Chris, thanks for having me again. And thanks for this meeting. It's been incredible. I am here like noting all the insights like a crazy guy. So I will share with you my screen, which have a quick presentation about what is happening here. If you can see it, just like wave me up, like do it like that. Okay, so just a quick review on Ticket Sports in 2024. We are now the biggest registrations platform in Latin America, which is good. And we are having 81% of growth in gross merchandising value. So the market is really growing up. And we are now the 7th more downloaded sports app in Brazil, which is good because of football. And we are always competing with a very popular segment of society here. And we are about to do 2 million registrations this year, including Brazil, Uruguay, and Argentina both. So this is a broad view about Ticket Sports. So from 23 to 24, we had some numbers to share with you. We are achieving 29% on growth in number of registrations on events, which is very nice and which is also not precedent having. And we are 7.7 up on total of runners in the country, which achieved 14 million by now, and 99.1 up on total of swimmers, which achieved 12 million right now. So this is the numbers from 23 to 24. The market is rising. We have now $22 on average ticket or average price. And this is a thing. Everyone is saying that the prices are up. In here, the prices are down between the last year and this year. And we think that there is mainly because the growth of the entry distances, which brings us to lower average prices. So that's the number. And this is a Google trend that I brought. This is the mentions of running in Brazil. So we are seeing that it's constantly between 2022 and 2024 going up. And now we are achieving a peak of research about running in the country. So here we have a very good and heated market that I wanted to share with you with these numbers. So there's a concern about that, which I can bring to table as well, which is the hype effect. So this is concerning me. This is a thing that makes me worry, because running for me and the other sports, they're not hype. They are like society shiftings. So we have this 20% organic growth in Latin, in all the countries that we seek and all the countries that we can like overlook. And we have this Gen Z discover of running, which brings us to this hype effect because they share a lot. They took 1.5% of the market from last year to this one, which is not that big, but in amount of the number of people that are running on the Generation Z is a good amount of them. And we say that Brazil is the digital influencers land. We have 10.5 million people that say that themselves are digital influencers around here. So this creates this hype effect, and it's a fake feeling because running is not a trend. It's not a hype. It's a society shift. So that's a thing we are defending here. And we think that society here is changing from inside. We have this change on demographics curves and all the things you see that is not a thing that is gonna like go down or maybe plateau for the next years. So it's not a trend, it's a thing. It's a thing of society. So this is a worry between our work and the general public opinion that we are fighting to. And the last thing about here, insightful, is a huge flooding that happened in a whole state of Brazil, Rio Grande do Sul, which is the biggest state in the south of Brazil and represents 6% of our GDP. And we are thinking about worldwide economic impacts, but also we have to be like as supportive as never we've been with that region. It's going to impact the market in terms of how many events they could be. It's like a real disaster, and we are all focused on how we can like leverage the business down there and how we can help them to rebuild the country, because literally we had a state and now we have no state at all. Cities were devastated. They're to the ground. So I think that those are the main things in South America. Now I'm interrupted sharing my screen.
Thank you, Daniel. And obviously a sad point to end on, but that ever-present threat of global warming to our events around the world, and the impact that, events being weather impacted, we speak about it more and more often. Thank you for that data. Let's go over to Soledad. Hello, Soledad. Lovely to see you again. How are you? You're muted there at the moment. Can you unmute yourself?
Yeah. Now?
Yeah, I got you now.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, there we are. Wonderful.
Okay. Wait a minute. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So tell us how's things in Argentina?
Well, here in Argentina, we are crossing a big social and economic situation, but we still have faith in the market and in the runners.
Yeah, and tell us a little bit about your events. You've got a number of events which are growing, and when we were preparing for this, you were talking about how you're getting really great traction in the kids market, which is so important for the future of our industry. Talk to us a little bit about that, please.
Yes, we run the New Balance Mission Urbana here in Argentina, in Brazil, in Mexico, in Chile, and in Spain and in Colombia. And we saw significantly numbers in the growth of the children that participate, not only if they participate in the category of kids. We have another category of kids and parents. One adult that run with some children of the family. We have seen that this is the future of our distance, because here in Argentina we don't use the mile as a metric system, and it's also challenging for us to make the distance grow. But as we always said, the distance of the mile is so pure, and is taken by runners who doesn't run every day, and it's a pointing start for running. Then we are now exploring the race for children, because we saw that is the way to the kids to know athletics, and that is what we are doing this year and the last years.
Wonderful, and that point that you make of a kid coming with a parent is potentially bringing more runners into the system. That's great. Thank you for that. Let's come over to you, Guilherme, and I know you've got a short presentation that you wanted to share as well, so you should be able to bring that up on your screen.
Hello, Chris.
Hi there.
Hi, Irene.
Yeah, there we go. We can see that.
Thank you, Chris, for the invitation. Now I'm going to tell you about 2 marathons that will take place here in Brazil. Starting with the Rio Marathon, which has reached the incredible mark of 45,000 runners. It is impressive to see how this event grow every year. These numbers show how popular and beloved this marathon is. The register opened in October last year, which price is starting at $43 in the first batch, and ending at $88 in the third batch. This year's the Rio Marathon is also hosting the Race Emergency Medicine course, which will take place on the race weekend. One point they are having investing in is the post-race party with major Brazilian music artists. Now let's talk about the Porto Alegre Marathon, a race that has grown significantly post-pandemic. This marathon is expected to take place with more than 20,000 runners. And the race was initially scheduled for June 16. As Nael has already mentioned about the floods, the marathon was postponed to September 29th. And it's important to mention that the Porto Alegre Marathon serves a qualifier for the Boston Marathon. So it is crucial that the new date be accepted so that the runners' results can be considered. Many Brazilians chose the Porto Alegre Marathon because it's a fast race with a cool climate, which favors a good times. This is the first part for now, Chris.
Say that again. Yeah. Whilst you've got it, why don't you go on to your other slides about your circuit and the collaboration? I'd be good to hear about that now. It's a really interesting concept.
Okay.
Yeah. Your mega finisher circuit. Sorry, summit first and then the mega finish. Yeah.
In January, the second edition of the summit took place, which has a great achievement for the entire running market in Brazil. This union between ABRACEO and the Brazilian Athletics Confederation is an important initiative to generate learning and growth for our industry. The summit brought together big names from the world of running. For the first time in Brazil, we had the presence of Alessio Punzi, Mark Rorg for the Valencia Marathon, and Adalberto Iriarte from the Buenos Aires Marathon. And we are already seeing positive results for the summit. Before the event, we only had one race with a WA label. Now, post-summit, we already have 6 certificate races. This progress is very significant to show how important the event was for development of our sports. And let's move on to Mega Finisher. A circuit was created to promote the exchange of athletes in South America race. A kind of South America majors. The circuit includes 6 races in 5 majors capital. And the new circuit reward runners who complete 5 races in 16 months. The Mega Finisher is an initiative by Brazilian enterprises and is an excellent way to promote sports. This is all about Brazil Insights, Chris.
Thank you. So just to touch on that, so that's a collaboration of 5 completely different races in different countries with people coming together to drive more participants, I would imagine, and get the circuit. That's kicked off already, or it's going to be happening during this year?
The kickoff already last Sunday in Lima, Peru.
Okay. And it's already looking like it's building in terms of number of entries from other countries, creating an impact.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, you know, in terms of a learning, we have the super halves, obviously in Europe, maybe a similar concept here, this opportunity for collaboration between races in different countries and different regions seems like is a potential opportunity. We only have a few minutes left, and time always flies on these things. So I'd love to come back to you, Daniel, just to get a bit of a sense. You've been in the industry for a while. Your ticket sales are going. Crystal ball, tell us what you see happening. You have your concern about the hype being more of a change in society. But as you look forward over the next 12 years, what do you see some of the challenges and the opportunities to wrap it up for us?
Yes, Chris, thanks for asking. We have a few rising topics around. One of those are the climate change, because it caused already a huge damage for us. So we are discussing with the organizers, how can we deal with that? And temperatures here in Brazil are not easy and not welcoming to runners. So we already are in very hot terms in 7 a.m. So how do we do in a climate change scenario in order to protect business? That's a thing. So if we don't know how it's gonna be next, if we have to be able to assume that we have more storms and rains and floodings, and how do we work as producers on these kinds of situations, you know? That's a rising point, and that's a thing that we must discuss. And here, since we had like a very good example, a bad example, but a very tangible one, this is a thing. And I think all the market worldwide should like address this topic, not as an like political just way of viewing it, but also as a business viewing, because it's a thing. It's a thing for our market, because we are outdoors and we need streets and we need places to be. So if it is all flooded up, how are we gonna manage to keep our races going? So that's a thing that rises a lot in here in this last month, and I think it's a good topic to address. Also, the fact that Porto Alegre Marathon will need recovery, and for them is very important to have the qualifying to Boston. And Boston is not already answered them about this topic, and we are very we are like hoping and cheering that this resolves it, that they like give Porto Alegre timing for like qualify the athletes, because they use Porto Alegre as the flat race, as Guy told us, as the flat race it is to make timing. So athletes are waiting for that. So we hope that Boston can like understand this thing and allows people to join with the Porto Alegre timing. But overall is a growth timing. We have like all the events sold out. Maratona do Rio, as Guy said, also sold out. And we have a lot of things coming and selling out. And the news are good. And we have to postpone the most we can this entry of new people. We are talking about 5K rising. All the program here, we saw it. And here is the same. So we need to keep and postpone the most this very good timing for us worldwide, I think.
Wonderful, thank you. We'd love to talk more, but we're very tight on time. We got to go into the final segment.
I am sorry.
But I think overall, positive news, some challenges, climate, the importance of collaboration, and certainly the role that ABRACEO plays in that in terms of bringing the industry together, the importance of kids and the work that you're doing there in Argentina with that, which is obviously important across the world. Thank you so much, Soledad, Guilherme, and Daniel, for your time.
Thank you, Chris.
And your insights.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. As we move on to our final segment, and thanks for waiting patiently, we have ended up running a little bit over tonight with this packed program. We've got Jay Holder, who's the Executive Director of Running USA. He's been standing by patiently. I know you've just come back running the rim to rim to rim in the Grand Canyon. You've got a stinking head cold. You're over towards the west coast of USA, so it's an early morning start for you. But thanks for being patient, Jay, and I'll hand over to you. You should be able to share your slides, and look forward to your data.
Chris, Alessio, thanks so much for having me. I'm going to share my presentation here. Let's make sure we can see it. Here we go. Yes, as Chris mentioned, I'm in Flagstaff, Arizona right now. Monday, ran rim to rim to rim in the Grand Canyon with two of my best friends, and it was an incredible experience. But as any endurance event does, it weakens the immune system, and I apologize for my raspy voice as I fight a cold this morning. I want to talk about what we're seeing in U.S. road racing, especially post-pandemic. I took over as executive director of Running USA in November of last year. And one of the big questions I had is, what exactly is happening in participation in U.S. road racing since 2019? There was a lot of anecdotal information flying around. We knew that some of the bigger races were seeing record registration interest. We heard Hugh and Sam talk about how that was happening in London just a few minutes ago. But what was really happening industry-wide? Because as everywhere else, the race landscape here in the United States varies greatly from your New York City marathons to your local community 5Ks. Registration data is incredibly difficult to aggregate because it's coming from so many different sources, and it's being collected in so many different ways. So we decided to enter a partnership with a company here called Athlinks. So Running USA now partnering with Athlinks, which is an aggregator of finisher data from races across the country. And they pull in timing data from a number of providers that gives us, certainly there's no 100% accurate look at what is happening, but it gives us the most accurate look at who is participating in our events here and who's crossing the finish line. We have access to more than 300 million individual finisher results dating back to 1960, over 481,000 events. So we can really compare and contrast and look at trends. Again, I'm going to focus here on the last 4 years, but I do want to show you what we're seeing in March of 2024. So Running USA has started putting out this monthly road racing trends report. We're seeing about a 5% increase in total finishers year over year from 23 to 24. We are seeing the number of events decrease. Part of that is just the length of time it takes to pull the results in. And part of it is that we have seen a bit of a correction in what was a saturated market, as some of the races, some of the smaller races, and that's not to say not quality races, but some of the races that were not didn't have as much of a foothold here have not returned since 2019. So we are seeing some decline there, and you can see that our race finishers in March of 2024, the vast majority was 5K. And our largest events were the United Airlines New York City Half, the LA Marathon, Shamrock Marathon Weekend, Rock and Roll, Washington, D.C., Half Marathon, and the Gate River Run. But we're going to look at 2023 because 2024 is, we're still learning to see what's happening in 2024. So, I went back a page. All right. So total finishers, 23 to 19. Obviously it's a pretty drastic number. We're seeing that we had about 3 million fewer total finishers in 2023 versus 2019. 2019 was really a peak year in the US for distance running. That coupled with the pandemic that we hit in 2020 is the reason for this difference, but we're also seeing a smaller number of events. And that brings the average number of finishers up, which is ultimately a good thing for event producers here in the US. One thing to note on this data, we did filter out events that had fewer than 500 finishers. And it's not because we believe those are not important events. It's because the reporting on that finisher data is often very unreliable and doesn't always come in through the avenues that typical large races come in through. The story between 2022 and 2023 is a much more encouraging story. We are seeing significant growth year to year. Finishers 23 versus 2022, almost 800,000 more finishers. We are seeing the number of events grow, and we are seeing that average finisher size for races go up. So really, the growth from 2019, the comeback of the industry, if you will, is happening. It's just happening at a more gradual rate than I think we're seeing in some of our top tier events. Let's look at this breakdown by distances. The most drastic change we can see here is our 5K, 10K numbers. And a lot of that has to do with the number of events. But we are seeing from 2019 to 2023, about a 1.5 million finisher difference in those events. But again, that average finisher number has gone up. If you flip that over 2022 to 2023, the story once again, much more encouraging, off almost 500,000 more finishers in that distance. And I want to look at now where we're seeing the most growth, and that is half marathon marathons. The number of finishers, total number of finishers 2019 to 2023, much less drastic than when we're seeing in 5K, 10K. We are seeing a smaller number of events, but it's a difference of 300 versus a couple of thousand. And as we go into our top events and where we're seeing our most finishers, you'll see that marathon, half marathon distance is incredibly popular right now. And then here's 2022 to 2023, almost a 200,000 finisher growth and more than 40 events added year to year in the half marathon marathon distance. So definitely an interest there in that market. And clearly, again, looking back at that London Marathon example, looking at what we don't include is the number of people who were turned away. We know that the New York City Marathon saw a record number of applications, Chicago Marathon as well, Boston Marathon as well. So we know that demand is much higher than the number of finishers we're seeing. Also, this does not account for people who signed up and did not finish the race or did not show up for a number of reasons. This is people crossing the finish line. Let's look at our top events in 2019 here in the United States. You can see the New York City Marathon, the highest with just over 62,000. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution Peachtree Road Race in Atlanta is second, and then Walt Disney World Marathon third, Bank of America Chicago Marathon fourth, and our Boulder 10K in Colorado is fifth. So a mix of marathons and 10Ks there in 2019. If you slide over to 2022, it's almost all marathons and half marathons with the exception of the Peachtree, which sits in fourth, but a drastic decline in the number of participants in those peak races. You were looking at 62,000 in the New York City Marathon in 2019 versus 51,000 in 2022. A number of reasons for that. A lot of it, obviously, people just coming back in 2022. And of course, there were restrictions on how many people could be let into races in different communities here still in 2022 as we came back from the pandemic. But 2023, a return to normalcy, and you see that the marathon distance is really thriving. The Walt Disney World Marathon weekend, that includes all of their races, the biggest event in the country. And we do know that the demand for that event much higher than the number of finishers. The same is true for the New York City Marathon and the Bank of America Marathon. And we're seeing these hyper local, but very popular 10Ks in Atlanta and Boulder, Colorado, coming back as well, coming back maybe a little slower than the marathon distance, but they're drawing from a smaller number of participants as those races, especially the Peachtree. We know that the Peachtree is 90% local. So a smaller pool of people to draw from, but certainly an encouraging look at the comeback from the 2019 and the 2020 dip. This is, I think, the most encouraging slide we have on here, and that's average event size year to year. And we're seeing the number of finishers in 2023 significantly higher than 2019 number of finishers, almost 700 per event on average here in the US. That's certainly great news for race organizers who are seeing more and more demand for their events. That's far outpacing our peak year in 2019 mostly because of the decline in events that did not return. And then, not a huge surprise here, but wanted to look at gender breakdown by marathon finishers. We're seeing about 58% are male, about 40% are female, and then your non-binary and prefer not to say category, we're seeing it about 1.5%. And another very encouraging slide is our finishers by age group. And I'm including marathon because that right now seems to be, by demand, the most popular distance that we're seeing in the US. And you can see that those key demographic age groups and I've combined men and women on here, those key demographic age groups from 25 to 39 are really right at the top there. And that's certainly great for marketers of events. And it's certainly great for the sustainability of the future of some of these events. So that is a quick and very high-level overview of our of what we're seeing finisher data-wise in the US. What we're really excited about is we're just getting this information. This investment with Athlinks happened about 2 months ago here at Running USA, and there's so much more that we can dive into here. So we're going to be continuing to put out reports like this that go to a much more granular level throughout the next year. And we're excited to see what that means for the running industry and what we can look forward to 3, 4, 5 years down the road. Chris, I'll turn it back over to you for any questions.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jay. Thanks for being with us, sharing that wonderful data. And again, it's a bit of a trend that we've seen in some of the earlier presentations, which you might not have seen, is this excitement around the 25 to 29 and the younger demographics. We were sitting here, 2 years ago saying, baby boomers moving on, and where's the industry going, and where's the next lot coming from? And you've just seen the news out of Argentina of the young kids and running with their parents and so on. So really encouraging, and look forward to, we're running a little bit over time, so I don't see any questions in the chat. Oh, hang on, there we are. Dan Lazar's asking, can we get the Running USA deck? Yes, as always, we'll share all of the decks. So the recording and the deck will be made available. Yeah, Jay, thanks so much. I don't see any other questions there in the chat, none from me at this stage. So we'll let you go and get some well-earned rest. Thanks again, and we'll look forward. Great for those of you that don't see them and subscribe to Running USA's weekly emails. Lots of great information that comes out there, and that data that you shared on that earlier slide that's going to come out on a monthly basis. I'm sure there'll be many people that will be following that. But yeah, thanks again, Jay, for making the time. And for the
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate the invitation.
Take care. Bye-bye. Safe travels home. Folks, so that's pretty much the end of the show. Thank you for staying with us. As I said at the top of the show, our biggest registrations ever. We had nearly 500 people registered. A big thank you to our 20 speakers from across the globe. As I also just said, the recording will be made available. We have been live streaming on the Mass Participation World Facebook page. So if you joined later and wanted to go and catch up with the beginning of it or share with any of your friends or colleagues, that's available immediately from tomorrow whilst you're waiting, or from right now whilst you're waiting. The slides and the decks will be made available to everyone. Yeah, really thank you for staying the distance. Those of you that had stayed with us, a big show tonight. Apologies that we ran a little bit over, but hopefully it was worth your while with lots of inspiring and insightful information. We'll be back to you soon with news of the next one. A big thank you again to Alessio for the opportunity to be part of this in World Athletics. And here you are, Alessio. Anything you want to say before you wrap up?
You said it all perfectly, Chris. Thank you. And I hope that the attendees who are left can consider joining the Colorado Springs World Athletics Athletes Conference. Get in touch if you wish to learn more. Otherwise, on our website, you can find all the info. Thank you. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you very much, Alessio. And so thanks everyone else. As we wrap it up, I'm Chris Robb, the CEO and founder of MPW, saying thanks for joining me. Thanks for your company. And have a wonderful rest of your day, night, morning, wherever you may have been joining us from. Bye for now. See you next time.